Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting for February the 15th, 2022. To start the meeting, will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please note that because Chester County is currently an area of high transmission for COVID, we are asking all attendees to wear a mask while seated or moving around. When making a comment or asking a question, you may remove your mask to speak if you wish. I'm really hopeful that in a couple of weeks, given the current trend of COVID transmission in the county will be down to a moderate or low transmission rate, and perhaps we can consider no masks. But tonight we're going to ask that you please keep masks on while standing and moving around. Please be aware this meeting is being streamed on the Township YouTube channel, and the meeting may also be audio or video recorded by people present in the room. So our first agenda item tonight is a presentation from Aiden's Heart Foundation for a donation of an automatic external defibrillator, an AED. And I believe with us tonight is Rita Stern, the Executive Director of Aiden's Heart Foundation, and other members of the foundation, Judy Coutinho, Robbie Healy, Janet Colleton, and Rick Stevenson. So I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, if you come up and join Ken here.
The other members you mentioned are from the Greater Sunrise Westchester Rotary Club. I'm the only representative from Aiden's Heart. Thank you so much for inviting us. I'm the Executive Director of Aiden's Heart Foundation, and our mission is to create heart-safe communities in southeastern Pennsylvania. And one of the ways we do that is by placing AEDs, which you see over there. It's an automatic external defibrillator that is used to restart the heart in sudden cardiac arrest. And we have placed over 115 AEDs in the community. And we've also trained over 8,200 students from the downtown area school district on how to do hands-only CPR and how to use an AED to save a life. And then we also do community heart screenings, and we have screened over 2,200 kids in the Chester County area. We wanted to thank the Greater Sunrise Westchester Rotary Club, because without them, we would not have been able to provide this AED to the community. So I wanted to thank all the members that are present. From the Rotary Club, we wrote a grant, so they partnered with us, so we were able to do this. So we're hoping the AED doesn't have to be used, but if someone has a cardiac emergency, it usually takes emergency personnel about 7 to 9 minutes. And with an AED, it's a very simple device, and anyone can use an AED. It tells you exactly what to do, and it will save your life.
That is awesome. Ken, who are we presenting it to? Is it Bob?
Robert Sappone, Chairman of the West Goshen Park and Recreation Board, will be receiving the AED. And if you folks don't mind, I would love to get a photo of you with the seal in the background.
Very good. Come on over here.
Don't mind blocking those guys out. We'll see them later on tonight.
And can we heard that everyone that works here is trained on how to use the AED?
Yes, all of the, I'll turn around this way, all of the parks maintenance staff, the event staff, the summer counselors are trained to use the AED. We hope that we never have to use it, but we are prepared that if it is used, the staff is adequately trained and certified for AED use.
So, ladies and gentlemen,
No, you're okay.
I'm Janet Colleton. I'm president this year of the Greater Westchester Sunrise Rotary Foundation, which is an arm of the Greater Westchester Sunrise Rotary Club that meets very close to here. We're proud to donate to Aiden's Heart Foundation the sum of $1,400 to subsidize the purchase of the AED that is located at the rear of the room today, and to be used by residents. This was a vote of the board, and we had certain requirements that needed to be met, which have been described here, that people were prepared to use it at the time that it was donated. So we're proud, we're happy to be able to donate at this time so that it can be used and given to West Goshen Township.
All right. Ready.
Well, thank you very much.
Everyone knows that AED will be located at West Goshen Community Park.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much to the Rotary Club and the Aiden's Heart Foundation. It's very much appreciated. I'm going to move on now to agenda item number 4 on our agenda tonight, which is another very important thing in the community, which is about a youth initiative partnership between West Goshen Township and the Westchester Communities That Care. And I'd like to welcome Loretta Cohen.
I just nod at you and okay, thanks. So my name is Loretta Cohen and I'm here tonight representing an organization called Westchester Communities That Care. It's one of those things that, you know, we say one of those best kept secrets. It's been around since 1999 in partnership with Westchester Area School District. It's a nationwide model that we use. We started out at the University of Washington saying that all people who gather under this model, taking various sectors of the community and bringing them all together to work toward the end of improving outcomes for kids. You can click. One of the ways we do that, the main way we start with, is something called the Pennsylvania Youth Survey. And again, our partner Westchester Area School District surveys about 3,000 kids in 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grades every other year, and have been doing that since 1999. So that allows us to track behaviors and perceptions and attitudes around substances and addictive substances, but also around mental health, because we know that mental health and substance use go hand in hand. So these two topics have been on the forefront of people's minds in the recent past. Most recently, mental health. But prior to the pandemic, everyone was all right. There's a lot of talk about opioid use. And we're really working on a level of primary prevention, meaning starting upstream, right? We're not waiting until someone is addicted. We're looking at what are the ground foundations that can be laid so that future generations, we're always looking the generation ahead, aren't impacted by that. Go ahead. So that's my slide on the mental health data. This data was taken from 2019. Our last survey was done in the fall of 2021, and we don't have those results back yet, but in 2019, pre-pandemic, 32% of our teens reported that they felt sad or depressed most days. We look at data not in terms of what it is right now, but we look at the fact that in 2017, that number was 27%. So we're always looking at like what's increasing. Yes, where do we fall in comparison to the state? And we can look where we fall in comparison to the country. But honestly, when push comes to shove, we're all about Westchester and the greater Westchester area. So we really hone in on what our numbers are saying. It's one of the beauties of this model is it's very local and very focused on our kids. A couple things we do with that data. It's 115 pages. If you want to see it, you can find it on our website at wcctc.org. Most people and most parents don't have the bandwidth to look through 115 pages of graphs and it's excellent data, but we pull together a team of people, again, from all sectors of our society. Education, Department of Health, youth justice type environments, our business partners, our faith partners, and say who has an interest in this and is willing to go through that data, look at what stands out. And from that, and I gave each one of these to one of the supervisors, but they're also on the back table if anyone wants to take a closer look. And we just tried to summarize alcohol, what's happening with that, what are the big data points on marijuana, what's coming down the pipe, vaping, prescription drug use, and mental health. We follow that up with professionals from the area. What are their tips? What do they say? This is what should be done. What parents can do, tangible, what do I do about it type of points in here. We also have that in a presentation form. That's fine, it went on. We do those presentations, one specifically on this data and what to do about it, but then also these were two we ran last fall. We try whenever we can to translate what we're doing into Spanish so that we're looking at that aspect of our population as well, and it's not being lost by having it all in English all the time. So we did a couple on mental health last fall. You can go ahead. This is the organization we partner with to help us translate that. They've been a tremendous resource and they also work very closely with the Westchester Area School District. This is a resource fair we ran last fall with them. This is just examples of some of the things, tangible things we're doing hands-on with some youth in the community. We build bulletin boards with middle schoolers. Again, it all points back to this data. So we put it into a kid-friendly format, explain it on the middle school or the high school level, and then try to encourage them to use their influence for good. And we say, what are you into? And we happen to have a high school boy who's very, very into video making, and he made a video for us about how you can go to the park with your friends instead of when the choices in your refrigerator are water or beer, and you're thinking about the beer, we show the kid put it back, take a water, and go to the park with his friends. So, yeah, you can go ahead. So one of the other things we do is that we take this data beyond here, and we're trying to move it into this what's next. How do we get information in front of people? Even this is pretty comprehensive and hard for people to really, like sink all of this in. So we tried to say, well, what were the biggest points that stood out, and what do we really need to look at? We started last year with just this Youth Matter campaign, just to get people used to who we were. You can go ahead and switch that. But we know that marketing is one of those things, for better or worse, it always changes our behavior, right? We all just went through the Super Bowl, all the money that people pay into advertising to sway our beliefs, what we think is important. And we want to do the same thing, the same way we did with seatbelt usage, and we got an entire population to start doing that. Advertising got a whole population of people to start smoking and a whole population of people to stop smoking. So we want to do that same thing with this. You can go to the next slide. The biggest risk factor we actually had in Westchester in 2019 was low commitment to school. So please remember, we had a lot of really good data points on commitment to school. We had a lot of points where we were above the state and above the nation. But remember, we're really, really just concerned with Westchester. So because we did have declining numbers in kids who were acknowledging that they felt recognized when they worked hard or felt that their work was meaningful, those things make a difference to us in our professional lives. They make a difference to kids. And it has a direct impact on their self-esteem, how they feel about themselves, and the choices they make. So we went one step further and created these ads. This is a series of 4 ads that we're running January, February, March, and April. And this is where a little ask comes in for anyone sitting in this room who has means to access to social media or platforms or electronic newsletters you're sending out. We want to share this with every one of those sectors that I talked about, whether it's townships being one of them, government is one of them. What are the channels that we can take and push this message out? It ties directly back to the data. We're not sitting in a room willy-nilly deciding what messages to put out there. And again, very specific to our kids. So this is really to the data point that said that 57% of our kids were saying they didn't feel recognized when they worked hard. And I always say, whether they are being recognized or not, there's a disconnect if they are, right? If we as adults feel like we are, that's not the answers we're getting back from the survey. So these are the 4, so you can they're kind of all similar, recognizing my effort, just that it's going to make kids want to get up and try again when they fall or they fail. Because we all do it. So again, I go back to this coalition model. The data out of the University of Washington, it is an evidence-based model, the coalition, and it says that kids are 25% less likely to engage in delinquent behavior and 32% less likely to initiate alcohol use, which has been proven time and time again. That's the drug of choice for teenagers, and that's our population that we're looking at. So while it is right to be concerned about the opioid epidemic, for our youth, if we really want to start upstream, we have to look at alcohol. And it pays back in dividends $5.31. So, again, so there we are, right? These are the kind of the things we're looking at here today. These are the categories of our sectors that I'm kind of speaking to. One of the things I love to point out, we have officers in the crowd, is that one of the data points we have tells us that our law enforcement is doing an amazing job. Our kids are not going to liquor stores and getting served by and large. They're not going to beer distributors or bars. Underage, our high school kids, that's not where they say they're getting it. 2/3 of kids who have access to alcohol and say, or substances, addictive substances, are getting them out of their homes. So that's why we go back to, it's a culture shaping thing. So I will be writing a grant to the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board to get funds to do this around alcohol as well. But really we're looking for community partners who are willing to share the information and push it out there. So if you're the township, you have my information. If you're in the audience and you can think of a way that you might be able to share those ads, my business cards are attached to these on the back, sitting on the table in the back of the room. I'd love for you to reach out and just, I will hook you up with these ads. I don't know what else I have on there. Yeah, so that's it. It's really finding ways to share the ads that we're putting out, understand that they're data, it's research backed. Find ways that you can do that. This is all really the same. Financially support the effort. We can push ads out further if you have, or do more community programming with youth and with parents if we have corporate backing as well. And then the last one is my big ask, which I always say every partner organization that we have needs a champion. If we have someone within the ranks who can help us keep that up, because this won't be the last series of ads we do. Next, when we get that 2021 data back, we're going to look at it again and say, what should we attack now? What are we going to attack next? This is a forever, we always say, back in the day, right, I was an 80s kid, it was cocaine. And then it was opioids. And then they keep saying the next thing down the pike is meth. So it's not if, it's just what, it's going to be a different thing. And we just want to make sure for Westchester that we're keeping our numbers as low as possible. So while we're on the subject of champions, I just really have to thank, we hold our meetings here, at least pre-pandemic we did, and your staff here at Westchester have been phenomenal. So great to work with, and I love Kate downstairs, she's amazing. So I just wanted to say thanks for that. I think that's all I have. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Loretta. I mean, we have social media, we have an e-newsletter, we have various social media platforms. So we can certainly, I believe, Chris, make sure this is visible and available to residents who access those.
So I think what we can do is start this with our March e-newsletter, because our February one is being finalized right now.
Sure.
So we can start with the March e-newsletter. And I don't want to speak for Chief Carroll, but we have the police department social media and the strong juvenile unit. We can probably share some information on that platform as well.
Yeah.
This would be good for some of the park and rec events too. I'm thinking, because there's so many children in our park and rec community that we have a lot of events, that would be really good to hand out the brochures if there's events also.
And parents might be paying more attention to the park and rec stuff, honestly. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great resource also.
Yeah.
And I just had one question relative
Sure.
to the mental health data.
Yeah.
You said there's still 32% of Westchester area school district teens feel sad or depressed in those days. I'm just curious how you get that data.
So it's all part of that, it's a Pennsylvania Youth Survey. And again, that was done in conjunction with that Communities That Care model. They based it and said, if your community takes this data and has a multi-sector approach to addressing those data points. So the Pennsylvania Youth Survey is, I don't even know how many questions it is, but the district signs on and says, yes, we will make sure that our kids take this survey so that you have good, solid data. That's the data that I said nearly 3,000 kids take that every other year.
Yeah.
In 6, it all comes from that same survey.
And thank you for what you do.
Sure.
And getting
Yeah.
involved in our youth. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Well, like I said about kids wanting their work to feel valued, like it has value, this job does, so.
For our monthly e-newsletter, what I can do is I can set up your email address with Dandelion Digital, so she'll get the emails every month to know when
I have one more question. I'm sure the board or the audience have any questions for you. So my question is, your engagement with the Westchester Area School District, was it been successful? Could you share any highlights or things you think still need some more effort?
I would say very successful. Their Director of Pupil Services sits on our board, so that right there is great. And then they offer meeting space when we want to do a parent presentation. Those all move to virtual. But their technology department assists us in getting those out there. So, and they promote when we do a parent presentation on one of these topics. Again, it's always kind of taking these data points and then saying, how do we keep getting it in front of people? Because again, with marketing, if anybody's in that field, it's not once and done. You have to many different angles with the same message. And so the district is integral in making that happen. They advertise it to the families of their 12,000 students. I couldn't say enough about them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Loretta from the board or from the audience? Let's start with the board.
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned you have ads for January, February, March, and April. How for the rest of the year? Do you have anything planned?
Well, we'll be getting new data. I have some in my tank from that specifically address alcohol, but we've used them historically around the holidays. And around the summer. There are times, so I certainly could. This is our first time of doing kind of a full-on marketing campaign around a PACE data point. So we kind of want to reassess. We'll get our new data in May and be looking at that in May. So we definitely will create more, but right now we don't.
Okay, understood. I just saying once we develop this pipeline communication, just keep it going.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the other.
Well, I like that energy. That's great.
Well, that's a great
Yeah.
concept, and that's
Yeah.
what we're all here for.
Yeah.
The other question I have is, I just Googled your website here, WCCTC.org, Resilience 2. Now, do you have any connections with mental health agencies that may be able to provide services for folks who have substance abuse problems or mental health problems or thinking of suicide or anything like that?
Sure.
Is there any connection there between your organization and other resources that may be of help?
Yes. So a specific example to that point is that, again, we brought together some of our community partners as part of that sector engagement, and they asked specifically for that. So for April, we're organizing a training with the Suicide Prevention Task Force and the folks over at Mental Health Department for the county to coordinate. And I'm also trained in this question, persuade, refer. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a really well done training that it's similar. Our Heart Association people, I guess, are not still here, but similar to CPR, this is called QPR. And the design is that you teach lay people to recognize the warning signs and to help a person get the help they need. You don't become a doctor. You don't become a therapist. You're simply a person who says, I care, I recognize these signs in you, and I'm here to help you get the help you need. So that's coming up in April. We're working on the flyer now, and we are looking for, again, sponsorship for that event. But yeah, so yes is the short answer.
I have a question.
Go ahead,
Loretta, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm so glad that you're bringing awareness to this issue because it's a huge issue.
Yeah.
My question is, have you noticed, just by looking at your data, a difference in the socioeconomic status of children or teens and youth that are experiencing these sorts of addiction more than others? And what does your organization do to address students and youth in underserved communities like that?
Yeah. So as I don't have data, I don't have knowledge in my brain right now, data on that particular thing. We have got, last year they gave us the opportunity to cross-reference data points. So that is something that we could go back and look up specific to alcohol and this, I don't have that off the top of my head, so I apologize. But as far as what we're doing, so it's an interesting thing because this stuff is universal, right? And our programs are universal, which means that we make them available to everyone regardless of socioeconomic status. And Sometimes what you'll find is that some issues of substance use are more of an issue among families of means, because people with fewer means, less means, can't access them as easily. It's harder to find the money to go get the alcohol or the drugs or whatever. So I'm just saying that there are reasons on both sides where both, whether you're, depending on what your socioeconomic status is, can have things that push you towards that. I feel like there was a piece of that I missed. But,
Oh, I think I was saying, what does your organization do to address that sort of?
We do, and again, part of what we're trying to do is, rather than say it's because of a socioeconomic status, we are working very closely with Padres Latinos to make sure that we are addressing the needs of the Hispanic community, so that we'll deliver this presentations that we do as much as possible in Spanish as well as English. I was really grateful to partner with Mainline Health last year, because we did a training called It's Okay Not to Be Okay, trying to help youth and their parents kind of wrap their heads around this, what's happening right now around mental health, especially with our teens. And they had a colleague who was able to deliver the same exact presentation in Spanish. So we just keep, and this was done in Spanish, and so we just kind of keep trying to push that angle.
Good work. Thank you.
Any
Yep.
other questions from the board? Any questions from the audience, from the public? Yes, sir.
Yeah. As residents, how can we help? And an idea I had is, any objection to involving your church, like the church I attend? We do international missionary, but we also do local.
Yeah.
And you're talking to a kid who started breaking into his father's liquor cabinet when he was about breaking. I just opened the door. And I had 4 older brothers, so it wasn't hard. And led to a downhill slide. But I mean, like educating, maybe having a session educating parents who need to lock their liquor cabinet. I mean, could we do something like that?
Yeah, locking things up is one of the things we say. As far as when I give that presentation, I told you about this data. That's one of the things, that whether it's prescription drugs or alcohol, know what's in your house and lock it up and keep tabs. That's one of the easy things, because 2/3 of the stories are your story, right? It was getting it out of your house. To your question, yes, I mentioned that training on suicide prevention that we're going to do in April, and that is a number of our faith partners are at that table. They want their staff trained. And really, we're kind of saying it's for youth leaders and like youth who are leaders and leaders of youth, right? So, and really, we're putting it out there as anyone who is a trusted adult in the life of a child. And that might mean it's your neighbor, right? If you see a kid next door who's exhibiting these symptoms, once you've been through the training, you'll know how to recognize them. And so we'd like everybody to participate, but it is being sort of angled toward our faith community, or maybe our community organizations that work a lot with kids. Maybe your staff, the summer youth staff, would like to participate. I don't know that they'd be on board by April, but maybe we can do another one. We're open.
Are you available to come and speak to a group if we've got a group of parents?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I would do that presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, I have 3 points. One is that, as the gentleman said, to reach out to the synagogue and churches to address their youth groups, get their parents involved. And the third one is to address kids of veterans who've been injured or killed.
Yeah.
And the third one is to address kids who lost a parent unexpectedly who was killed.
Yeah.
Because those kids are very, aside from being veterans.
Yeah.
So there's the churches, the synagogues, veterans, and kids who lost a parent unexpectedly.
Yes, those are great ideas, and those would definitely be, so there's a lot of also research being done recently around trauma, and the loss of a parent would be considered, a flag for trauma and could be a trigger for more intense mental health issues. Sure. Could be, isn't necessarily, but yeah.
So any other questions for Loretta?
The 32% that said that what they were depressed, what year is that from?
2019.
Yeah, I think it's a lot higher now. A lot.
We'll
higher.
find out,
'Cause
yeah.
I have a 17-year-old who's at East, and most of her friends are going through issues now.
Yeah.
Fighting and like things that, are really scary.
It is for sure. And it's better that we're talking about it, I have to say, right? That's a very good thing. Kids feel more empowered to talk about it. And that was with all of these issues, that was a big problem years ago, where there was a lot of stigma attached. And I think we're doing a better job at saying it's okay to say this out loud, to say that I'm feeling this way. And certainly from a parent standpoint, it's a very hard thing to hear. Your kids say that they're struggling on a concerning level. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Loretta. We're happy to support your organization. We wish you well in everything you do, and appreciate your time.
Thanks for your time and all the questions. I really appreciate it.
Very good. So now we're on to agenda item number 5, which is the discussion and possible approval of a final subdivision land development plan for 829 Paoli Pike, Stanbury, West Goshen, LLC, for a grocery store, restaurant, and mixed-use site. So Rick, your name is on the agenda item for this, so do you want to introduce the subject?
Sure. This is a combination land development subdivision project, 829 Paoli Pike, which was the old Spellman Building, Westchester Area School District property. The applicant, here's Paoli Pike here, the applicant proposes to construct an Aldi supermarket, a fast food drive-through building here, and another commercial building, unknown use at this point here. There will be 2 points of access, one here, which will be a full access driveway, and one here, which will be right in, right out only. The stormwater facilities are in the rear of the property here. The project has been reviewed by both the County Planning Commission and the Township Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission for West Goshen has recommended approval of the project. And there are a number of representatives from the applicant as well as their attorney here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, so board, we have this in our packet. Does anyone want to start off the questioning? Questions from the board?
I had a question.
Go ahead, Tina.
There is a waiver from section 301.1 of the Township Stormwater Management Ordinance. I don't know what that consists of.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
They're looking for a waiver from section 301.1 of the Township Stormwater Management Ordinance pertaining to the required wetland buffer areas. I'm just wondering what that's about.
Okay. The stormwater management basin here encroaches slightly on the 100-foot riparian buffer, which is required by our ordinance. As a mitigating measure to that request for waiver, Stanbury has offered to deed restrict a portion equivalent to 3 times the area of the encroachment as permanent open space to the north of the property.
And could you it's not really on that print, could you kind of indicate where that is located? It's not in that 10-acre space that they were looking to donate to the township, correct?
Yes, it is.
It is within it?
Yeah.
Okay. Where was it?
Up in here.
Is that within that 10-acre?
Yes.
Okay, so that's north of the property. And then also, are they going to require an earth disturbance permit or an NPDES?
There's no earth disturbance permit required. The land development process acts as our earth disturbance permit, and they have already received their NPDES permit.
Okay, thank you.
As well as their PennDOT HOD permit, I might add.
Rick, I have a follow-up from that. So the deed restriction, is that something that's noted on the plan as a note? That you're saying if they agree to deed restrict a certain area of land, is that somehow memorialized on the plan?
I believe it is, like, I don't know for sure.
Who's shaking his head yes? Is that a yes, Mr. Colerico?
Yeah, and if it isn't, I think it is, but if it isn't, we're going to put it in the land development, in the land development agreement. And really, the other thing we were waiting to hear on, it doesn't need to be deed restricted, obviously, if the township is going to take ownership of it. So it's sort of a chicken and egg situation. If you want it, we don't have to deed restrict it.
Thank you, Lou. Other questions for Rick or the representatives from the board? I have some, and I'm waiting to see what else you guys have before I start.
Well, at the last planning commission meeting, these plans were considered by the planning commission, and they decided unanimously to approve them or recommend approval to the board. There was some discussion about the fencing along the front of the property there, that it would be some decorative fencing on there. Can you explain what that was about, Rick?
Well, the proposed fence is chain link, which certainly from a safety standpoint is adequate, but not necessarily the most attractive. So Planning Commission requested the applicant look at using some sort of a metal protected fencing, but possibly with a more decorative nature to it.
And where is that fencing, Rick? Could you show us on the map there?
Around the wall here in the front.
Okay.
There's a retaining wall being constructed in the front here on the sides.
Other questions from the board?
Well, there were several residents who came there also, and there were some concerns that they had. I don't know if you would explain what some of your concerns were, namely disruption of utilities, noise during construction. Also, there was concerns about traffic along Peel Lake Pike, what that may consist of, how much more that would be congested. And then there was also some questions about signage along Fir Avenue, which is a private road adjacent to the proposed development to the east of it. So those were some concerns that were raised by some of the residents.
Okay.
So just so that everybody in the audience who may not have been a part of these conversations before, can we just briefly talk about the effect that so first of all, will there be additional impervious surface to this area?
Absolutely.
Yes. And has the developer agreed to not address the impervious surface and actually improve the stormwater management of that site?
The proposed plan meets all of our stormwater requirements.
Rick, can you give a bit more flavor to that? What improvements are we going to see? My understanding is right now there's very little stormwater management on this property. It's an old property, there's none. Okay. So what are we going to get from this redevelopment that's going to be a big benefit to what runs off into the creek back there?
I'd prefer that the applicant answer that question.
Okay. Is there an engineer from the applicant here?
If you don't mind, I'll...
Yeah, would you mind coming up to the microphone?
The microphone, or speak up.
Or you can point over there, that'll be fine too.
If I'm loud enough, I might listen to the
Sounds good. Would you say your name, please, sir?
Sure. Robert Freud, F as in Frank, R-E-U-D. I'm with Dynamic Engineering. So the impervious coverage changes by not even a half an acre. A lot of the front of the site is already developed from the school building. So as we redevelop, and the existing site basically free drains, there's no stormwater management system per se at the school building now. So everything runs uncollected, untreated back towards the Goose Creek. So as we develop, we do have a minor increase in impervious coverage. That actually triggers us to the stormwater requirements, creates a tremendous benefit because now we have the basin in the rear that will collect and detain that runoff, infiltrate some of that runoff back into the ground, and then the overflow will go through a level spreader back to the Goose Creek. So there's a fair amount of not only attenuation and detention, but also the treatment through the water quality there.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So that basin is going to address the increased impervious surface. Will it improve the overall situation that's happening in Goose Creek as it is now? Or is it just going to deal with the extra stormwater runoff that we're expecting?
So in addressing the stormwater requirements, we're dealing with our development area. We're taking what is there today and addressing that to the new stormwater regulations. What's happening, as you can see, the Goose Creek is actually not even on this plan, it's a little bit further back in the property. We're not affecting any of that. That's in the protected wetlands and floodplain, so we're not doing anything in that area, negatively or positively, because we can't go in there to affect that. But what we're doing by managing and reducing the runoff from our site will be our share of improvement to that area. But the overall Goose Creek is something that because it's protected by the buffer, we're not going in there.
So how many acres were already developed? And you said half an acre is additional impervious coverage. So what's the total acreage that's already impervious that's going to be now addressed with what you just described in terms of the collection, retention, filtration, etc.?
So the overall site is 17 acres. The impervious coverage is 15.8%, and we're going up to 17.3%.
Okay, so you're at about 10% to the exit. So the half acre is probably 10% additional impervious surface, right?
Yeah, sounds about right, yeah.
And now this whole 17.8% is going to be managed through a proper designed stormwater collection, retention, infiltration system, basically, yes?
That's correct, and as was stated, we do have our use permit for that.
Okay. Okay, so I have some questions. I apologize for the kind of random order I'm going to go through. Hopefully you can help me. So obviously the County of Chester's Planning Commission reviewed your design back in June of 2021. We're here now in February. So there were several things in here which I believe have probably been incorporated in terms of the recommendations that they had made. So for example, this retention wall that was a suggestion. So could you describe that and the rationale for why it was needed, what impact it's having? There were other recommendations about the width of the sidewalk, making sure that the sidewalk was extended to give pedestrian access down to the proposed building. So I believe most of these have been accommodated. So if you could describe some of the things you've changed from the design that was reviewed by the Chester County, I would appreciate it.
Certainly, and I'll start with the sidewalk. Both with Chester County and with PennDOT, we have sidewalk that runs not only along our frontage, but beyond our frontage to make an interconnection with the sidewalks east and west of us on the Paoli Pike. And then as you come into the site, there's a sidewalk that comes down into the site. Again, because of the grade change, it's ADA accessible. It's designed to be in compliance with ADA. And then internally between each of the three buildings and all of the uses will be interconnecting sidewalk with crosswalks and accessible routes between the buildings.
Okay. And the sidewalks, are they 4 feet or 5 feet?
They're 5 feet. Okay, yes.
There was also a recommendation about the traffic signal at Paoli Pike and Turner Lane. Is that part of what is being addressed in this redevelopment, Rick? Or is that a PennDOT thing?
At a very high level, what I can say is PennDOT reviewed that, and the traffic signal was not deemed warranted or necessary here. Anything more than that, we do have our traffic engineer here.
I think that's two different questions.
Yeah,
there already is a traffic signal.
Yeah, the one further up, the one to the east here, Paoli Pike and Turner Lane. Is there a modification to the way that line's working with this new development?
I'm going to have our traffic engineer speak to the details on that.
Good evening, Matt Hannon with Traffic Plan Design. To answer your question, yes, there have been modifications that were proposed, made, and approved by PennDOT for the intersection of Turner and Paoli Pike. Some of those were timing changes, but more importantly, a lot of the changes that were made and will be implemented are more safety and pedestrian related. We're upgrading the ADA ramps there at the intersection to make them ADA compliant. We're adding hand-man countdown timers, if you're familiar with those. It shows the hand, shows the countdown. Some additional signal equipment, detection, as well as Robin mentioned, sidewalks, but also the provision of more robust pedestrian facilities along the Paoli Pike frontage, including, as you're all well aware, of a bus shelter adjacent to the facility.
Okay. Thank you. So in terms of one of the issues was the truck access to the Aldi, to the loading dock. Could you describe how a truck gets to the actual loading dock? It's a bit hard to see. I'd like you to blow that section up, Rick, a little bit.
Certainly, and we did submit, Rick, let me find the page. There is a truck circulation plan. It's easier to go to that.
Sheet 21.
24 is the deliveries. So It's a little bit hard to see here, but this does show the wheel path of the typical truck that's coming in, and it will pull forward across the front of the Audi, then back into the loading area here, and then it's able to pull straight out. So the loading area is aligned with that drive aisle, so it's easier movement in and out with that turn.
And that reverse turn radius is fine for the size of the vehicle that's going into that truck yard?
Yes, that's designed with the vehicle that is typical for an Audi.
Okay. Where is the bus shelter going to be on this design? Is it shown yet?
Yeah, it's right in front of Horizon House.
So
it's the first property to the west.
It's to the west of the two entrances, right?
Correct, yes.
So you guys are confident that this is not going to create a severe traffic issue along Paoli Pike?
So, it's a good question. I can tell you that the location, at the beginning of this, if I had my way, we would have put the bus shelter along our frontage, right, in front of our property. We develop, the applicant is paying for the shelter, constructing the shelter, maintaining the shelter. However, in coordination with SEPTA, the location, as you see on the plan, is what was determined the best, safest, and most operational location by SEPTA. So we did have a lot of conversation with respect to the shelter and where it should be located, and they felt the location in front of the Horizon House was the best location, as it would keep the buses out of the driveways, allow for sight distance to occur with people entering and exiting those site driveways, but also keep the bus far enough away that it wasn't interfering with any of the movements. Now, there is a bus stop there today. The bus stop is actually located more so near this access point, this right in, right out access point. So we're basically taking that existing bus stop and formalizing it with a shelter.
But I mean cars going in and out of the building, going in and out of this complex.
Correct, yeah, so the overall traffic in terms of the shelter?
In terms of overall
Oh, I'm
traffic.
sorry, I apologize.
No, that's okay.
No. Yes, so a traffic study was completed. We did multiple iterations of the study. We did receive comments from PennDOT on a number of occasions, and those were addressed. We satisfied PennDOT's requirements with respect to how the traffic would operate. Obviously, we have two access points. We have a full access point closer to Fur Avenue, and then a right-in, right-out only driveway further away towards the borough. As you're well aware, the site currently has two full access driveways. So we were able to obviously revise the westernmost driveway to become a right-in, right-out. But based on the results of the study, looking at the peak hours of traffic, the AM, the PM, and the Saturday midday peaks, and the adjustments that we made to the traffic signal, we then more than satisfied from that requirements for them to feel comfortable to issue a permit.
I mean, just personally speaking, I'm excited about the opportunity to have an Aldi go in this site, because I anticipate a lot of people who live in this area down here being able to walk there and being able to access it, and it's right there. So there's that, right? I think it's a good thing. And then there's the other part of me that's worried about the traffic and, the encroachment with Goose Creek and the stormwater. And so I'm, like, in my own head, I'm sort of balancing how this is going to end up sort of playing out,
So, they're all good points. I can tell you that I'm out at various municipalities 2 or 3 times a week, and the two biggest issues that weigh on everyone's mind when it comes to decisions are stormwater and traffic. It's just the way it is. But I can tell you that we have worked in concert with the Township and PennDOT on this site. I would say on more the east side of Turner Lane, where you have the shopping center, the West Goshen Shopping Center, where you have the newer strip center, and I don't remember the name of it, where the Chipotle is. I tend to see this.
Turner Square, yeah.
So you tend to have traffic stacked up in that area because it's coming off of the 202 ramps. But I grew up in this area. I live here. I work 2 minutes away. It's at times it can be challenging, but it always clears out. Right? When you get to the west side of Turner Lane, it's not as bad, and that's probably due to the fact that the road splits and you have 2 or 3 lanes going into the borough and 2 lanes coming back out. And we specifically when looking at this site and laying it out, we specifically took that into account, that split, so that we put any left turns further away from that split merge, and made the right in, right out closer to that merge to deter people from making those turns there. So it's a balancing act, as it always is. I feel confident that, not only did we take care of the traffic aspects, but we wanted to concentrate also on the pedestrian aspects, which doesn't always happen, but to have some sort of existing pedestrian network that we're able to enhance and extend, at the same time provide a bus shelter. We're also, and I don't know if the Township is aware of this, but SEPTA also asked us to provide a bus pad, a loading pad on the south side of Paley Pike, closer to Turner Lane where the existing bank is. So kind of in front of that bank, there's a bus stop, and they asked us to put a pad in there as well. So ADA ramps, pedestrian signal equipment, sidewalks, bus shelters, bus pads, trying to promote the walkability of this area and extend that existing network further out towards this part of the township.
I appreciate that. I really do.
I have some other questions.
Go ahead, John.
Can you talk about the landscaping plan here for this project? And in particular, what landscaping plans there are along the Fir Avenue, that stretch of road that's right to the east of the project? I think it's 15, I think, Chief 15. Now, there's going to be lighting there, obviously, within this parking lot. Now, how is that lighting and the landscaping going to impact the residents, especially along Fir Avenue?
So I'm going to start with the lighting briefly first. So from a lighting perspective, all of the lights on site are compliant with the standards, the Southern standards for light levels, including 0.1 foot candles at the property line. So those businesses and residences on Fir Avenue that are along that property line will have the 0.1 foot candles. And this is, I think, tonight a full moon, about a half foot candle with no lights on outside. So we're way, 20% of that is 0.1 foot candles along that property line. So you have very diminished light levels already at the property line based upon the design today. We made an effort to use LED lights, which give us a very clean, efficient light source, downward focus. There won't be the glare that you see on some of the older shopping centers where you have floodlights and things like that that will create the glare. So that's number one on the lighting.
People are just seeing a bunch of dots on a piece of paper.
This is hard to tell.
I mean, what is that? What are you showing here?
So you zoom in. So what this is, it's a photometric study that was done. We model each light fixture. We get the manufacturer's specifications of the light. And so here, this is the model designation for this particular light that's located by the loading area. You can see the height designated there. That's a 20-foot high light. So, and it's a little bit hard to see. This one has, I think, a house side shield on it. But that's each light, and then we plug that into the software, and that creates the illuminance level. So all of these are readings at about a 10 to 20-foot grid throughout the site, getting the readings showing, and here's the property line with the businesses and residences on Fir Avenue that were 0.1 foot candles along that. So that's the study of the entire area. We use that for multiple purposes. We want to make sure that we have uniform light throughout the site. From the parking lot, you're not going to light areas to dark areas to light areas, but it also allows us to look at the levels of the property line.
So you're saying at the property line there's going to be like a 0.1 foot candle illumination brightness?
Correct.
Okay. Which is equivalent to like what, like you said, like a moon or something like that?
A full moon is 0.5, so it's well below that.
Okay. All right, and now can you talk about the landscaping also that's going to be done?
Right, so then if you go back to the landscape plan, what we have is a row of Douglas fir, double row of Douglas fir going along from the back corner of the Fir Avenue property line across to the front of beyond the front of the last business there to the point of the parking lot. So all of those businesses and residences are screened with that double row of Douglas fir. They're going to go in at about 8 feet. Once they give it a year or so, then they're going to start really growing at close to a foot or so a year. So that'll get, and by making it a double row, you get a nice thick screen in there that'll really screen and protect those residents from what's going on site.
Is there any fence along that side of the property?
There is a fence along the length of the loading area, a solid board-on-board fence to screen the loading area.
But not down.
Not between to the
No,
right,
a number of
property
the properties there have their own either hedgerow or fences along that line, but we're not adding one.
I mean, one of the things you can get from a development like this is a lot of ground litter that then blows around onto other people's properties. So one concern I would have is if there is litter, what stops it being blown to the east here and into the rear of the property owners of Fir Avenue?
Well, we do have the fence along the loading area, and then, for example, the main retail area is a little bit lower than the driveway, and because of the wall and fence, that's generally protected. So that, and by regular patrol, all of the tenants here would have regular patrol for litter, so that'll keep that area clean as well.
Rob, can you talk about the topography a little bit? That might help.
Yeah, so this site, as I'm sure the board is aware, sits lower, certainly lower than the road, and even a little bit lower than the adjacent properties. So everything is a little bit lower here, so it's going to naturally kind of collect in our site, and then again with proper patrol and maintenance by the active uses on site, it'll be kept clean.
When you say a little bit low, you're talking about a foot drop from Fir Avenue into the main area of this development.
So it depends on where you are on the site. Across the front of the alley building, it's probably a foot or a couple feet from this building here down into the front of the alley.
Rick, is this landscaping plan, is this kind of the minimum that our ordinance requires, or is this kind of beyond the minimum acceptable?
Well, the total landscaping plan is beyond the minimum. The double row of evergreen screening is typically what the zoning ordinance requires.
Does that kind of screening, although it's good for screening, is there a benefit having lower shrubs as well along that to kind of really, I know there's a drop off there, you just described that, so is there a benefit?
Fit the lower shrubs between the evergreens. They're 10 foot on the centers, and they're staggered,
So in your opinion, this is the best landscaping design for a buffer barrier from between the two properties, between properties on Fir Avenue and this development?
That's what the zoning ordinance requires.
The consolidation of the lots to create this overall redevelopment, was there any on-lot disposal system for sewage that you're removing and remediating at all? So lots of on Prospect Avenue?
There may or may, I'm just going to double check here. I don't believe so, but everything is on sewer now. We found no evidence of well or septic
on any of the lots,
residential lots or the school property.
So one concern might be for traffic inadvertently going down Fir Avenue instead of pulling into this. What kind of signage are you going to have that allows people to see from some distance, where they're headed to, that's consistent with our ordinances and kind of helps mitigate the likelihood that someone would turn into Fir Avenue prematurely?
Yeah, that's a good comment. We've talked about that a lot. We talked about it with the residents as we've proceeded through the design of this application. One thing I would note is today the school building and its driveways and Prospect Avenue is relatively nondescript. So it's a little bit hard to tell what's going on and actually where the entrance is. As this gets developed, this driveway will define the entrance, and you'll have the buildings that'll identify it. We also have a sign that is consistent with the land development ordinance along the frontage. It'll be 50 square feet.
Where did you point then? Where did you just point?
Sure. It's 30 feet back from the ultimate right-of-way, and it's 50 square feet and 30 feet high. So it's consistent with the ordinance, and we'll be able to, and we typically put it by the driveway, so that it identifies that point of entry to the site.
It's 30 feet high?
Yes. And keep in mind, there's some grade change here, so as the site begins to slope down, the height is designed to help compensate for that and have it at an optimal line of sight for drivers on Paoli Pike.
Well, you can see how close the entranceway is into the proposed development to Fir Avenue. Can you put some kind of do not enter signs in front of Fir Avenue so people will realize that is not the entrance into the complex?
I can answer that. Yeah, we could broaden it out and say, what is it you can do to really, beyond just having a big sign right there, which may still make, I don't see that that would help people make the right decision as to which entrance to go in. Maybe if it was further to the west it might, but where it is, I don't see it. People like to still turn into Fir Avenue.
When we discussed this with the Planning Commission and some of the residents, Rick pointed out Fir Avenue is a private road, so we can't do anything absent the consent of the homeowners on that road. We're willing to put up signage that says, do not enter, not a shopping center entrance, whatever they agree to. It's not too hard for us to do, but obviously we can't do it on our own. We have to have permission to install that signage.
But that's something you'd be willing to do, then?
Oh, yeah. That'll probably help us too. I mean, anything that eliminates confusion and congestion at that entrance point is fine. But I think there was cards exchanged at the Planning Commission meeting, so we'll follow up on that.
One thing that this board has encouraged in the past is certainly not a requirement or a mandate in our ordinances. What about sustainability type issues? And one of the things when we see these kind of retail commercial redevelopments, we always ask, are you thinking about some kind of electric vehicle charging within the parking lots and stations, etc., that would allow people who are visiting to be able to, planning for the future, if you like, and making it hopefully more attractive even by having that amenity available. Have you given any thought to that? Are you proposing any EV charging within this redevelopment?
None is proposed at this time. I don't know if Mark, you want to speak to that, but at this point, it's not part of Albi's program to provide that.
That's something we're happy to go back to Aldi and ask them if that's...
Yeah, I'd love, that's our ask basically, is could you consider it? Again, it isn't something that is required, but it's something we would like to encourage, and it certainly seems to me businesses should be thinking about that as a future opportunity. Just today, our chief of police is, you've now got a new Tesla to use, so we're certainly thinking for the future here, and we want to encourage the redevelopment in the township to think similarly. So if you wouldn't mind, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm not sure if they do it as a part of their business plan. They haven't proposed it here, but happy to ask.
Yeah, they have one of the giant, down on Downtown Pike. They put one in there. People use it all the time, so yeah, you guys do.
That's a good point to bring up, Joe.
Yeah. Another issue I'd like to bring up.
Sure.
We have ordinances within the township concerning noise. What provisions will be made for construction activity throughout the course of this development, especially regarding noise and time of day?
So at this time, we don't have a contractor selected, but as we get to that point, we'd certainly have a pre-application meeting with the officials within the township and work within the ordinances as with regard to time of operation for construction and any noise standards.
Just following up from that question, there's been a concern raised about possible disruption of utilities of residents along Fir Avenue. Will there be a contact person, or suppose somebody has a problem? They feel it's been related to construction activity. How will they go about resolving that?
So again, at the pre-construction meeting, not only the contractor but the owner of the site would provide contact information usually to the township, so that if there were anything to happen, we would typically have someone that has 24-hour contact access.
So if a resident had an issue concerning, they felt it had to do with construction, he would contact the township, and then the township in turn would contact the developer's representative to resolve it.
Typically, yeah.
That's correct. We get all that information from the contractors and subcontractors at the pre-construction meeting. They have our numbers, which are 24/7, and we have theirs as well. So, I'd also like to point out that the existing sanitary facilities are to the rear of the Aldi and are not intended to be disturbed during construction.
I would like to hear from you.
I have an additional question. Does the 10% increase, with the 10% increase in impervious cover, will the creek be able to handle that?
Yes, and the design is that the stormwater basin will provide the attenuation. And keep in mind, that 10%, that's an increase over what's there today, but the entire property is 17 plus acres. So it's a very small increase. The zoning would contemplate 60% impervious coverage. We're a fraction of that. So kind of going back to the stormwater questions that were raised before, this is, in my opinion, from an engineering and a stormwater standpoint, this is an ideal redevelopment project. We've got a 17-acre site. The front 5 or so acres is developed. It's dated. It has no stormwater management facilities in it, so per se. We're coming in. We have a slight increase in impervious, but it's all being managed. So we're actually bringing a site that doesn't follow it doesn't live up to the current standards today, and we're bringing it up to current standards. So it's going to be an improvement, in my opinion, from what's there today.
Both the rate and the volume of the stormwater will decrease from the current conditions.
Thank you.
Just one more question, man. If you can, are you in a position to be able to share which businesses will occupy these 2 buildings at the front?
I can answer that. Mark Potchman with Stanberry. The front building right in front of the Aldi is a proposed retail multi-tenant building, which we have nobody that we're currently have signed for that. And it came up at the last meeting of the Planning Commission, the restaurant on the left. We received a signed lease from Popeyes a couple of days ago. So we can announce that it's a Popeyes franchise taking that location along with the Aldi's.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the board at this time?
Sean, I have a question.
Yes.
Lou, in the very beginning of this project, you had contacted me about vacating Prospect Avenue, and the County Planning Commission letter references that, but did that change?
It did change because I was educated to the fact that the road's not a township road.
Street.
Okay, so is that incorporated into this, or it's staying private? It's not. I can't see.
It's no longer going to be a street. Show where it is right now.
Sure. So
okay, I just wasn't sure.
Generally follows the line of the driveway on the west side here.
But you're purchasing, or part of your development is what is the private road today.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So it serves the district property and the 2 residents that are all part of this application.
Okay.
So its purpose goes
So
away.
there's nobody else that needs the use of that property.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
There will remain an easement over that for the sanitary sewer and water though.
Okay, thanks. And those easements are shown on the plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions, Kristen?
No, that was it.
So is there anyone, so you want to say another word?
Yeah, just real quick, I actually had lunch with a potential contractor today, going over his numbers, and there's a couple things that may be pertinent, additional costs that were identified. One was SOX sediment traps, which I don't know if it's Mr. Craig or NPDES, and another one was Flex Storm inlet filters, which I imagine all goes to enhance the water quality of the project. I don't know if you can speak about what those 2 components are.
They sound like construction-related temporary facilities.
I believe it's an enhancement to the storm drainage system to filter out sediment before it moves on to Goose Creek, which I think is the intent.
Is it a temporary thing or a permanent installation?
No, it's permanent.
So we have generally two stormwater systems. The majority of the site goes to the basin in the back. There's a small section of the site, this parking lot here. Again, as I just mentioned, the sanitary sewer, force main and gravity line that run through this easement keep us from being able to collect this lower northwestern parking lot and bring it into the basin. So that discharges to a level spreader in the rear here. So in order to help with sediment control, we're adding those features into the few inlets that are there before discharge.
Okay, thank you. Are there any residents of West Goshen Township here who would like to ask questions or make comments on this proposed redevelopment? Yes, sir.
My name is Philip Springer, and I own a house at the end of Florida Avenue. That buffer, is that going to be the same type of buffer that you have over on Wood Avenue around the arbors?
I can't really answer that off the top of my head. It's a dual row of evergreens, staggered on 10-foot centers, starting at 8 feet in height.
Yeah, but they don't, the ones at the arbors, they seem like they wouldn't have much effect with sound or anything like that.
Vegetation has almost no effect on sound attenuation. It's
Well,
not.
that's my next question.
It's not designed to attenuate sound. It's designed to be a visual buffer.
What about noise? The trucks unloading, unloading.
They will generate some noise, but they have to comply with our noise ordinance for times that they're allowed to deliver and load and unload.
Yeah, but this is going to be like a 7-day operation too, right? So
Right.
7 days a week, you're going to have trucks coming in there, right?
I don't know the answer to that.
So there definitely is restrictions in the noise ordinance for when those activities can occur. So, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but there are definitely regulations as to the time of day that deliveries and backup beepers and that kind of stuff can operate.
Okay.
And it's further restricted on the weekends. So it's more restrictive on the weekends than it is during the weekdays.
And I also will quickly answer the question, but I still have a problem with Fur Avenue traffic. I went through this when the borough rented the building for a year. People come down there thinking they're going into the school, the borough building.
Well, I
And
think
they
keep in
find
mind,
out that they went to a dead-end street and turned around my driveway and looked at the road like,
okay, well, keep in mind too, these driveway entrances are going to be significantly improved from what was there for the school district. So it's going to be brand new construction, much different character. It's going to look like an entrance to a shopping center, not like a little private street. So can I tell you that nobody's going to go down your street? I can't do that, because I'm sure somebody will.
I understand that.
But it's going to be very clear what the entrance to the shopping center is. It's going to be 3 lanes wide with a median. So it's going to be a lot different from your little street. And again, if the applicant's willing to put some signage up there, private road, no outlet, blah, 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 whatever, that's a great idea as well.
Okay.
Sir, I would encourage the neighbors, once the facility's up and running, if you're experiencing problems, to get in touch with the township, who can also then get in touch with the developer and ask them to do what Mr. Clevereco is, saying they'll do. And the board may even want to consider, if you're going to act on this tonight, to ask that a note be added to the plan that memorializes that commitment on behalf of the applicant, just so that there is something that you can go back to on the plan to show that that was something they agreed to do.
Okay. Well, one more place I would say, I'm a firm believer that commercial and industrial should not mix in with residential. And it seems like lately, over the past years, that this township is putting residential in industrial zones.
This property is zoned commercial, it's not zoned residential.
What's that?
Fur Avenue is zoned commercial, not residential. So
No,
your
I'm
residences
talking
are
about-
pre-existing
I'm just
non-conforming uses.
I'm bringing up other places in the township. One's where you put up a residential community right next to an airport, a runway. And that's zone industrial.
I don't know when that was built. That was pre this board as well, so I hear you. I mean,
And it happened down on Matlack Street, and also happened across 202. You put an apartment complex right at the end of an industrial complex.
Which they're zoned for.
That's what I'm saying.
Township zoned it.
Why is
it's pre this board.
why is residential, why are you allowing residential places in its zone?
Certain apartment uses are allowed in commercial districts. That's the way it's zoned.
Okay,
I
thank you.
don't think it's right. I don't agree with that.
Thank you for your comments. Other questions from residents? Is somebody at the back there? Oh.
Ms. Chester.
Yeah. You answered or addressed most of the questions that as a resident we have, but I'm still not convinced about the traffic patterns, especially coming out of Fir Avenue making lefts, or, you know, we know what it was like with the school board, and we still know that, with increased traffic on Paoli Pike. I just hope that the way that you say that the traffic is designed, that it's still safe. And I'm not sure I feel confident based on the conversations that we've had. The second thing is, I understand that there's noise ordinance, which we as residents would probably like to become familiar with. Because I think it's online, so we can look at it and be aware.
Just go into West Goshen Code and look under noise. I think it's 52, for some reason that number's sticking out. What is it?
Chapter 52.
Yeah, 52.
And I'm also going to request that something, the township or Stansbury notify the residents during the construction that things are going to be taking place, especially if you're turning our water off or on in order to do whatever you have to do. Because I stated at the planning commission meeting when they were looking at the sewer gas came to my house, and I want to be sure that whatever's done or whatever improvements you do don't affect the people on Fir Avenue, especially because if the main sewer pipe runs along not Fir Avenue, but runs along the side of my property.
Runs along the, right, and along the back.
Yes,
Yep.
all on the back.
And across the back of the property, that's right.
And I don't want, to be disadvantaged, and I also would know, I guess, if there were an issue, I'd call the township and Stansbury so it could be addressed. Okay. And also, if the township is getting the woodlands, is there any maintenance or follow-up in terms of managing the woodlands since it's there? Is anybody going to be responsible for what goes on in that area? Is there a place in the township that manages things that go on in those areas?
So let me address the rear of the property here. So the Stanbury West Goshen LLC has kindly offered to donate the rear 10 acres or so to the township. It's not what we're discussing tonight. The board here, in terms of it being a real estate acquisition, is going to hold an executive session to discuss whether we would like to do that or not, and go through any appropriate due diligence that's associated with it. So as it stands tonight, this property is not going to be developed to the back, but it still remains with Stanbury West Goshen, and we're going to work with them to decide if the township should take the kind offer that they've made to donate the rear of this parcel.
And I want to make a pitch for the deer. There's at least a herd of 30 or 40 deer that live in that woodlands, and you're taking some of that property away. And I don't know if it's going to affect us, but it's like something I'd like you to consider in your discussions and your deliberations. And I don't know where they come from, but usually most of the year they're 20 or 30, and they come all the way up to Paoli Pike, which is not really safe, but they're there, and there are our residents too.
Thank you for your comments.
Ma'am, can I get your name for the record, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Carolyn Chester, and I live like him at the bottom of the hill, where people come and make their U-turns and then go back up Fir Avenue. And my driveway looks like it also.
Thank you.
Can I address one of Ms. Chester's questions now, as far as the traffic's concerned? Because I had this thought when we were speaking about the traffic before, and tell me if I'm wrong in this. Is there any way in this situation that we'd be able to put some sort of a clause in that says if it does lead to some kind of severe traffic issue, that we would then reevaluate the situation down the road?
No, not really. I mean, you have standards in your ordinances, and if they meet it, then they meet it. I'm not sure what even you would say as far as reevaluating. This is a PennDOT road, and PennDOT had to approve the entrances and the HOPs. So the township had very little actually to say about what happened along Paley Pike, the PennDOT road. So the HOP is something that runs with this particular property, and they have to comply with whatever conditions PennDOT imposes.
One of the things Ms. Chester raised, which is reminded me and is a bit of an annoyance, is I don't believe our noise ordinance protects nearby residences from not necessarily excessive sound, because they can be temporary, whether it's a truck backing up or whatever else, but this low-grade frequency of HVAC systems or other electrical, mechanical noise that isn't an excessive decibel level, but is a persistent whine. So it just reminds me, I would like to go back to that noise ordinance and look at the quality of life type issues that can be raised by persistent noise nuisances that aren't necessarily above a certain threshold, but are constant and persistent, and affect people's quality of life. So I don't know whether, I'm not saying there's going to be that issue here, it just is a reminder that I don't believe our noise ordinance is as good as it should be. Other questions from the audience?
Yes.
Back there. Could you state your name, please?
My name is Mike Dunn. I'm with the Goose Creek Alliance. We're a collective of environmental scientists, engineers, and environmental professionals that are involved with trying to promote meaningful floodplain restoration within the Goose Creek corridor, which adversely affects lower socioeconomic communities in the borough of Westchester and in West Goshen. So we believe that it is completely unacceptable to increase any sort of impervious ground coverage within the Goose Creek corridor. This is an opportunity where you could have development that meets the demands of the community, but also could be a progressive environmental development. And we see this as an infringement on a very limited area. There's two areas of opportunity on Goose Creek. The area, we need acreage to do these projects for floodplain restoration. Any infringement on these two areas, one behind Kenmore and one behind this place, is just limiting our opportunity to do so. So, yes, there's a stormwater basin retrofit involved in this design, but oftentimes they come with protections, which would impinge further meaningful floodplain restoration within this area. So, I would, number one, that's our primary concern. Number two, the landscape design is inappropriate for this region. Does not follow standard design specifications for species diversity and the types of trees used on site. So Douglas fir is not a tree that will last more than 5 years without chemical input, which I would think is an appropriate species. So we are extremely concerned with any sort of development within the watershed. We'd like to see a decrease in impervious. I think any increase is inappropriate. There's a lot of options for sustainable design, where you can do that through soil cell infrastructure, rain garden design, green roof infrastructure. So I don't see how this is a win for the environmental aspects of this. So we just wanted to make a statement, and I mean, we're kind of late to the game, but this organization is only a few months old, so we're working on this project. And we've pretty much surveyed the entire length of the Goose from behind Kmart all the way down to where it joins Chester Creek, and we have a very limited opportunity at the headwaters to make any sort of impact, and this will further decrease our footprint.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Any comments, Rick, or from the applicant's representatives about the landscape design first?
Well,
do we have options around what type of trees to put in, or is it just Douglas fir gets the best screening, so that's why it was selected? Could we revisit that, do you think?
I'm more than happy to revisit that as long as
There's two criteria here, one, isn't it? One is native and sustainable, but from a residence on Fir Avenue, it's about visible screening, so there's like two goals to achieve.
So if you have a suggestion, a native tree, maybe a white pine or something, that would be more, that would also accomplish the second goal.
Well, I mean, we shouldn't just pick one tree. So any design should increase. You don't want any more than 10% of one species. So when you have one species represented, you have a higher percentage probability of losing the entire stand to an introduced disease. So Douglas fir cannot exist in this environment without 3 applications of chemicals a year.
I'm happy
to give it up on it, so.
We're happy to.
Yeah, so let's do this. You've heard the issue here. If you could take it away and get some input and work with Rick on an alternative to what's currently proposed, I think that would be acceptable if the board agreed.
If they have a list of...
I would also like to add my concerns for environmental too, and I saw your presentation, I think was excellent, and I appreciate what you're doing and the effort you put into this over a couple-year period. I know you've been studying it. So I had a lot, that's why some of my questions related to that. My request is if Stamford could work with you in suggestions that you would have to help with the stormwater and the landscaping and exactly what they have. That's what my request would be.
I'm not advocating that what's there now is great by any means, but I do think that if we could have a healthy medium where we could achieve the environmental goals, the fact that the acreage could possibly be donated to the township is a huge win.
Right.
But any increase in impervious in this region, I think, is a loss for everyone. And I don't have our watershed maps on us right now, but we're going to have a website in 5 with ArcGIS data sets. But Goose Creek is a mess, and it's creating a lot of problems for all of these communities that reside along it, including Burnham and Westtown. So we need to take drastic measures we can't plan for 100-year storms anymore. We have to be planning beyond that.
Right, let me interrupt you there, Mike. So we've got 2 issues here. One is we've heard that the applicant has accepted the recommendation that you made relative to re-looking at the landscaping about what would be appropriate from a native species. Maybe we can get some shrubs instead of all trees. I don't know if you need different barriers or whatever. I understand. We're just looking to do something different that's currently proposed. And thank you for saying you're willing to look at that. On the first point you made about the floodplain restoration, right now, whatever's on there, sediment-wise, breaking up concrete is washing into the creek. So it's not helping us by having the existing nothing. So this design will at least start advancing a management of stormwater from the, whatever we said, number of acres it is, that's currently impacting the creek as it stands today. So I understand that, adding a little bit more impervious surface is not necessarily the right direction. It is compliant with our stormwater management standards for this type of property. We all understand on this board that climate change is impacting the severity and frequency of storms that we have. And maybe our standards aren't as good as they're going to need to be in the next 100 years, but we are where we are today. So it is compliant with our standards for that aspect. But we do understand what you're making in terms of the point.
This is the opportunity to make these changes because this is where...
Well, this opportunity is to fix a problem that has no controls at the moment. So, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Margie?
Hi, yes. Thank you, Margie Swart. The very first plan that I saw of this development had the loading dock to the backside. And I'm curious if the applicant would reconsider that, mainly on behalf of the neighbors, just to be a good neighbor. Because I noticed with the loading dock right next door to the homes, the proposed dumpster is right there in that space as well. So the neighbors will contend with the deliveries and the trash truck. And I'm just curious why the plan changed the location. Aesthetically, driving into it, as you pull in, you're driving and you're facing a loading dock. So I'm just curious why that was changed. One question.
Yeah, that is a good question, and obviously we would have preferred. The reason we came in the first time with the other layout is we thought that would work well on this site. However, as we got through the development process, there is a rather large force main that comes from the pump station on the other side of Goose Creek and brings sanitary sewer through the site that would be in the way of that, and that became an exorbitant cost that we just couldn't overcome. On the original mapping we had, the original survey and original mapping from the sewer authority did not identify that. We thought that was just a gravity line and we could do some relocations and make it work. But once that was identified, it became cost prohibitive to do any relocation of that, and therefore we have to work around that. And we're leaving the easement where it is, and we have to work around it.
Okay, my other concern is, as it stands now, you're working with impervious coverage as it relates to the whole 18 acres. My concern is if the township takes over the 10 acres and essentially the applicant is left with whatever 5 or 6 acre lot, and all 5 and 6 acres, the entire parcel that they have is then 100% parcel, right, or impervious. So I'm having a hard time with that. And then also I like the idea from Chester County Planning Commission where they had some landscaping at the front of the lot instead of parking spaces all the way up to Paoli Pike. So those are just some of my comments. Thank you.
So Rick, or was there anyone else on staff, any comment about the fact that because it's a conforming lot with the wetlands at the rear, but if we were to take ownership of that parcel, this would then become non-conforming in terms of the amount of green space on this particular lot at that
No,
point?
it would not. We cannot create a subdivision with a non-conforming lot. So however this is subdivided in the future, if that's done, it will be a conforming lot.
Okay, and then to Marge's second question, is there anyone who could address that from you when you did the design? There was a recommendation that maybe, try to avoid parking spots right up near Paoli Pike, have some of the buildings closer. Did you reconsider that based on the Chester County planning comments, or was it not really a feasible design?
Because of the shape of the property, the constraints to the north and the Goose Creek, trying to respect that buffer and keeping the site as far forward as possible, even obtaining variance for the location of the fast food, the Popeyes restaurant. We tried to keep everything really towards Paoli Pike in order to protect that area that will be conserved in the rear. So it's a little bit of a balance. So the protection of the lands in the rear, in our opinion, kind of took precedent here and drove the layout to be really facing Paoli Pike.
It wasn't, the board may remember, it wasn't just our opinion. It was the zoning ordinance. We had this discussion about 1.5 years ago. Your zoning ordinance requires buildings to be set back 100 feet from Paoli Pike, which is sort of an older planning design. New ordinances would prefer to have that closer to the road. So we did go to the zoning board, and they did give us some relief to move the buildings a little bit closer, but they wouldn't give us 100 feet of relief to move it all the way up. So we did the best we could. We even had to get variance relief from the zoning board to move the buildings a little bit closer, consistent with the county's comments. That's something that you may want to take a look at.
That's a great point, Lou. I mean, the whole comprehensive plan we have for this Paoli Pike from the West Goshen Shopping Center down and towards the borough envisaged more of a frontage of activity closer to the Paoli Pike and not every lot to have acres of parking at the front, which, by the way, also messes up people trying to find the right entrance to pull into because they can't see the specific building. So I don't think we need to look at our ordinances about, 100-foot setback is got to be. And then every time we come to an opportunity like this to say, is it something we could do differently? It's too late kind of thing. So one more thing to put on the list to do there. Okay,
to point out quickly to address your concern with the parking along the front retail building there, that the finished floor of that building is down, 9 feet from Paoli Pike. So you're going to be looking over those parking spaces. You're not going to see the cars parking along Paoli Pike. And now in front of the Popeyes, we do have landscaping in front of those 4 cars there.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point to make. Thank you.
From a topography standpoint.
Margie, you have another question?
Thank you, Sean. I forgot. One last concern I have is if you're coming from the borough, you can't make a left into the first entrance. Is that correct?
Correct.
But you can from the second entrance.
Yes.
Correct.
I'm a little worried that many people may go up to Turner Lane where there's a light so they can make a left, but the problem is Turner Lane is also a private road. So I just to make you aware of that could be a concern as well.
Turner Lane is only a private road on the right-hand side, not the left-hand side.
Turner Lane is the signalized intersection.
Yeah, but between Paoli Pike and Jake.
But why would anybody turn right to go to the left?
maybe I looked at the map wrong.
I think if you turn to the private roads to the
Yes.
right, to the south of Payola is fine. Any other questions from residents of the township? Doug?
Should I wait until after this motion or make it now?
Just make a point now.
Okay, Chris, Doug by 1001 with you. We did vote on this, and we voted unanimously. We generally endorse the idea of doing this, but it was partly a procedural vote because it meets all township ordinances. We did have some concerns. Our chair, who's a professional planner for 30 years, had some problem with the traffic in the front and the two ins and outs being that close. Does meet PennDOT. PennDOT did approve it. They're a little on the close side, and he was trying to advocate for one in and out, but as Rick mentioned and Lou mentioned, that they needed it would be better for two ins and outs. And the second thing I wanted to mention was, I know we can't force them or make them do this, but just a suggestion, the nose-in parking, anytime there's nose-in parking at a sidewalk, I get nervous, and there is a curb. If they could think about making it an 8-inch curb or keeping it 6-inch and putting a bollard at the middle of each spot. And then Ashley's concerned about the stormwater. If they could add plantings to the back of the property to the north of the Audi parking lot to help with stormwater. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Other residents' comments? Yes, sir.
My name is Chris Hamilton, and I have a few questions. I've been taking notes. First one is, no one's really said this. How many car trips are going to be added onto Payola Ave in the course of the day?
So typically
on Saturdays, especially.
On Saturdays especially?
That's the busiest day, correct?
So that would be technically that, an evening or a midday on a Saturday is typically the busiest time period for retail use. We don't look at the overall course of the day.
You look at peak hours in the afternoon, peak hours in the morning and Saturdays.
Correct. So the peak hour on a Saturday.
No, okay.
I believe that's what you asked, no?
No, I just asked overall, how many are going to be added?
Again, I don't look at the overall daily trips. We analyze the peak hours of traffic.
Then what are they going to?
So I can tell you there are 129 new trips proposed in the AM peak hour.
So that's an hour?
That's the peak hour of traffic, 129. 167 during the PM peak hour on a typical weekday, and then 305 new trips on a Saturday midday.
Is that cars or trips in and out?
Trips. So it would be one car in, and that same car out is 2 trips.
But you don't do it for an entire day?
That is correct.
Okay. Another question is, if the protrusion into the buffer on the wetlands happens, and they swapped out 10 acres, how does that help the wetlands? Because the buffer there is supposedly there to protect the wetlands, correct?
No, the buffer is there to protect the stream. It's a riparian buffer for the stream. It's not a wetland buffer.
So if that buffer is protruded and swapped off with other land, how does that help the stream? Doesn't that degrade the protection for the stream?
Well, if that area were to be gifted to the township would, if the township accepted that, have the ability to, at some point, make vast and drastic improvements to that area.
But they're not gifting that. They're gifting 10 acres over here for this protrusion right here, aren't they?
No, show the tent. Can we put up the overall plan?
No, there's also a portion of that land being offered for dedication that is developable in the back of it. And so if you're asking, if you're putting the whole calculation together about what's being given up, there is a portion in the rear of that site that abuts, I think, another industrial park or an adjacent park. And it might be 2 or 3 acres that it's certainly a developable lot.
I'm asking about the protection, the protrusion into the buffer and the protection of the creek. That's going to be compromised, isn't it?
So walk you through a little bit where we went with this. There's the wetlands and the wetlands buffer, there's no encroachment there. There's the floodplain of the Goose Creek, there's no encroachment there. Then there's the riparian zone that comes off of the floodplain. There's, as we've talked about, there's the minor encroachment, and right now we're looking at the whole back of the property basically right now. Our development stops about at the bottom of the page. There's a small encroachment into that buffer here. At the top here, there's a large area outside the riparian buffer that is part of the would be deed restricted or gifted to the town, whichever way it goes. So there is a large area of additional riparian buffer that will go to the town to help protect the creek. And if you know what's behind there, you've got industrial zone behind there. So by having that area that is upland added to buffer to the stream, it'll provide some protection to those areas that predate stormwater regulations and predate control, and providing additional
But this gentleman just said that land is developable.
No,
It wouldn't be.
It wouldn't be if we
That's the
deed restricted or give it to the town.
So, but you're still going to approach it. I don't get this.
So let me ask a question. The area where you are encroaching into the 100-foot setback, is that part of the land that's being offered for dedication to the township?
No.
No,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we're,
Why would you seek a waiver for encroachment if it was?
Because right now, that land is still all part of their property.
the little property is 17 acres and change. The front, give or take 5 acres, is what we're developing. Part of that is the small encroachment into the riparian buffer. Within the remaining 12 acres, 10 to 12 acres that's going to go to the town, is a large area outside buffer that would be developable, that will become conservation area and or.
Right, but that's not, that big area that you're donating is not within the wetlands buffer, right?
No, we'd be expanding, we'd basically, the stream buffer, riparian buffer, we'd be essentially expanding the buffer in that area to include that upland area so that it's forever protected.
Beyond what's required.
Beyond what's, exactly, beyond what's required.
I mean, it just seems like we're swapping off an encroachment or.
I think it's about 3 to 1, so for
Right, but
the area that we're
that's
taking.
not the wetlands buffer, so.
It is not a wetlands buffer. It's a riparian buffer. It has nothing to do with a wetland. It's a stream buffer.
Okay.
And this will be added to the stream buffer, and it will be quite effective.
Which
So
is,
don't mix
which
the
right
two
now
up.
is close to the stream, the front or the back?
The topography slopes towards the stream from the high area to the north, so it would be a very effective riparian buffer. And it's 3 times the area that's being encroached on. So it is positive.
From an ecological standpoint, we're asking for minor encroachment. A lot of it is actually a grassed area, lawn area. And we are, again, we're managing the stormwater there. We're providing water quality, we're providing attenuation of the flows. So we're managing the encroachment that we have here. What we're offering in the back is upland developable area outside buffers adjacent to historic industrial areas that have no stormwater management to provide protected area that will help provide some water quality for those areas, continued water quality for those areas.
Okay. Another question I have is, does donating those 10 acres, does that reduce your tax burden to the town?
I can't answer. I'm an engineer. I can't answer
I
that.
don't know what you mean by, what do you mean by that, reduce it?
It's-
I mean, the
well,
property will become tax exempt once the township owns it.
Right, so it lowers their tax bill every year by
Not
donating.
necessarily, because that's undeveloped land. So the higher assessed valuation it'll be much, first of all, it's exempt right now. So it's not on the tax rolls, at least the school district property isn't. And once it gets redeveloped, the assessed rates are going to go way up, and
It'd go up
higher
anyway.
with the buildings than it is with vacant land in the back.
Right, but,
So at the end of the day, I guarantee the township will see more tax revenue with this development.
well, I don't
Even
doubt,
if
I don't
donating
doubt
10
that,
acres.
by donating the 10 acres, they reduce what their ultimate
Not by
tax
much,
reduce.
not by much, because the assessed valuation for the land is so much smaller than the assessed valuation for the buildings.
No, I understand that, but let's say they didn't donate the land, the tax burden's here, by donating the land, it comes down to here.
Well, yeah, you're looking at it compared to, comparing to what we have today versus what the end result is, I'm sure that, as I said, that there will be a net positive tax increase to the township, tax revenue increase to the township.
Another question, you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, that would they look at, they agreed to look at other alternatives for the fencing, correct?
So I was confused about the fencing. The fencing was more around the wall, which was fine, that they've agreed to that when it went to the planning commission. My concern was more about a physical barrier to stop any trash that could get blown over onto residential Avenue. And the answer was there's actually quite a gradient over on that side of the property. So whatever landscaping we do end up with ultimately will be one, visible barrier. But the drop off between Fir Avenue into this property is such that, to me, it seems unlikely you're going to get much blown up on Fir Avenue. So
What were you talking about, the chain link fence?
The chain link fence was around the retaining wall. It was agreed to be something different.
But my question is this, they offered to look at other alternatives.
Are you referring to the planning commission meeting?
No, it was said tonight, I wrote it down tonight.
It was earlier conversation about what you discussed at the planning committee meeting where it was agreed to the chain link fence.
Right, so originally it was a 4-foot chain link fence, and now it's represented on this plans before this board as a decorative fence along that wall.
My question is if they agreed to try to find an alternative, the words that concern me is they agreed to try.
It's done.
No, it's,
That's not what was said earlier.
He just said it's on the plans. We made the change between the planning commission meeting and tonight to show the decorative fence that would replace the chain link fence.
Someone said earlier today that they would try earlier this evening to do
It was said at the planning commission.
If I did,
someone said this evening, please tell me.
Okay, well, they did it already. It's right there.
if
So you're
that's
right.
how I
Originally
described
they
it,
answered-
I apologize.
You're right. Originally, they answered they would, well, he asked them if they would investigate it, but now they're correcting
And
the
I said
record.
yes.
They're correcting the record and telling you that it's already been a plan change.
That was changed from last week to this
Right.
week.
Yeah, the request to look at it was made at the planning commission meeting. They did look at it, they did change it, and now it's changed.
I know, I'm just saying that what was said, I'm asking about what was said tonight. If it was said incorrectly,
Okay,
don't
then
push
it may have been said incorrectly, but it's corrected.
You say you're going to reduce the impervious surface?
No, nobody ever said that. The impervious surface is increased.
That was the first thing that was discussed.
Will reduce the stormwater impacts by the attenuation that's provided. There's a minor increase in impervious surface.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions from residents? Okay, so at this point, we're ready to consider the request for approval of this land development plan. Where's the board? Is someone willing to make a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
There's two caveats to all of it.
Go ahead.
There's two issues that are brought up tonight that need to be addressed and memorialized somehow or another in this recommendation. And that is to work with the residents to add signage to Fir Avenue. You guys okay with that, right?
Yes.
All right. And then the second thing is the issue brought up with Mr. Dunn about considering alternative buffer vegetation along Fir Avenue. How can we word that in such a way that that'll be accomplished?
I think that the applicant agrees to investigate alternative plantings along the whatever buffer that is, and consult with Mr. Dunn for appropriate species. But ultimately, it should be the township engineer should sign off on that because it has to meet our code.
Right, the species will have to meet our code as well, so we can certainly look at that, have no objection to that, and it can simply be done as a field change.
If you have, sorry for your name.
Mike Dunn.
If there's a recommended list of plantings that you have with your organization, if you want to send them through Rick Gregg, we're happy to look at that with Rick and come up with a planting plan that still meets the ordinance, but satisfied, comes off that list instead.
Yeah, and the notes, if this gets approved and there are conditions, then the plans will have to be revised to add those notes. So if that can be done in a quick manner, then, and you can come to an agreement as to what those new species are, then you can swap out the detail on that as well. I mean, I don't know what the timing of that would be, so. And it may be something that's better to wait until it's constructed, I'm not sure.
Okay, I had one other ask to add to the motion. I did hear you mention the contractors proposed some enhancements to the stormwater management for the parking lot area that goes out away from the basin. You mentioned two specific things.
Yes, those are incorporated.
You've already incorporated those?
They're already
They are part of the plan.
They're required by.
Ignore my comments, thank you.
Sean, did you want to ask them to investigate EV chargers?
No, I mean, that is a request for you just to, you know, follow up with your potential tenant here, Aldi, and hopefully they'll give it some consideration. So it doesn't have to be part of this motion,
Okay.
but it's just an ask of you to part of working together.
Yeah.
So we've got those two requests that have been added to John's motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'm going to second.
Thank you, Robin. So I have a motion and a second. Is there any final board comments or questions? Is there any final public comments or questions? Mr. Dunn.
Yeah. A third, is there any opportunity to decrease the impervious on the existing site using different techniques, building styles? There are plenty of options for impervious ground cover that exist that aren't incredibly expensive. For walking surfaces, for paved surfaces, if you could meet that 0-0, not increasing impervious by decreasing the impervious on parts of the developed site, I think everyone in our organization would be a lot more comfortable. That can be achieved through many different ways, but
I like that. Yeah, me too.
Can't require it under the code.
Well, the other thing I'm wondering is if it comes in conflict with other provisions of zoning that require parking spaces and drive aisles to be impervious surfaces. I mean, I don't know enough about the plan, but sometimes, you know, there are certain sections of the ordinance that require certain areas that are heavy travel areas to be impervious. So by asking for that, it may put them into non-compliance with things they don't have, you know, that they need variances for.
well, it doesn't have to be impervious cover. It can be as simple as improving the landscape infrastructure to increase the holding capacity. So lawn space has minimal holding capacity for moisture, but landscape regions have a much higher percentage of how much water they can accumulate and cover. So rain garden installations are an option that can be a very effective way to manage stormwater.
Stormwater, I will say this, I mean, the applicant has been accommodating on virtually every request that was made of it. Stormwater permitting is a very procedurally nuanced thing. The permit that we would have to go back and amend our MPDES permit, we would have to, I'm not even sure that what's being proposed, as Ms. Camp points out, is compliant with the ordinance. As many, regardless of whether the manufacturer considers a surface to be impervious, the township many times considers it, or pervious rather, the township many times requires it to be calculated as pervious or impervious. The point I want to make here is simply on the issue of stormwater management. The incredible benefit that's being brought in that one area alone with this development. We all saw what happened last year or 2 years ago. The Westchester Borough moved in here, and that could be done here tomorrow. If this site isn't redeveloped, someone could come in, not seek land development approval at all, just as the borough didn't seek any approval. They could occupy this building. The 2 residential houses could go occupied as residential houses with no stormwater control, no benefit whatsoever to Goose Creek. A continued detriment would go on, as has gone on for the last 50, 60 years. So let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. This is a very good first step, second step, third step, fourth step in improving the Goose Creek watershed. The additional amount of impervious cover is minuscule in comparison to the benefits that the township is getting. And in fact, it's way under the impervious coverage allowance by the ordinance. The ordinance allows much more coverage on this site than what this applicant is proposing.
If it's minuscule, then why can't we zero it out?
Because that's what you need, a certain amount of parking to make these uses work. You need, trust me, there's no infrastructure on this site that's there gratuitously. It's there because either the ordinance requires it, you heard the request by the county for sidewalks to be added, you heard the pedestrian connectivity. I mean, if we didn't put a sidewalk on Paley Pike, we'd be well under the impervious requirement. We didn't have all these interconnecting sidewalks. So it's, I get a little bit concerned, and I think not as concerned as Rick would get, when we start talking about modifying stormwater management plans that have been vetted, reviewed, and before reviewing agencies for 1.5 years. So let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. This is a huge beneficial first step in improving, I think, the whole stormwater management structure. Because presently, right now, there just is none.
Okay, thank you, Lou. So I have one last question on it. So at the end of the day, is there any grass that's left as part of this buffer that could be improved with plantings that isn't, being touched at this point in the design? Is there part of that grass that's at the back of the property, near where that basin is, that's just being left as is, that could actually be improved from a stormwater management perspective?
So the area to the rear, behind the alley, behind the walls, and you can even see the parking lot that's west of the alley to the left here. We put a retaining wall in here to limit disturbance and limit the grass area and maintain vegetation. Anything behind that we can propose as something that would be, say, a typical low-maintenance lawn area that would provide that. So anything behind alley, I think we could provide an alternate seating spot there.
That's what I think we could do. Yeah, I mean, I don't think grass is a great buffer at all from what I understand. I mean, I think some plantings there might just be fine. So as part of this reassessment of the plantings to the east of the property, maybe we could look at if there's something you could add at the back.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think Rob was speaking about putting a bunch of plantings in the basin. He's talking about different seed spec.
So, yeah. So
I was talking about the basin. I was thinking you were telling me there's still a grass area that kind of is back there that
is not really limiting the development, with the wall, so that we're not just grading out and putting lawn in. We're trying to maintain that buffer in that treat area.
Okay, sorry,
but where we are doing it behind the wall and around the basin,
it's there.
We can't necessarily put plantings, but we can put a low maintenance grass that maybe gets just cut once a year that will be much more naturalized and provide more, I think, what we're looking for.
Thank you.
Let me just, we've been at this now for 4 years, and the school board has been very accommodating with contract modifications, extensions and the like. And as Lou has mentioned, everybody's more or less piling on, and we think in a good way because it's addressing a lot of issues for a lot of different people. I don't care what happens in the back end of the detention basin. We're just not in a position to keep piling on financially to this project. So I don't know if there's grants or other sources to put in whatever it is you'd like to put in back there. We're perfectly happy to look at it in that fashion. If that's something that helps the overall good, and there's a source to help do it. That's
okay. Doug?
Okay. Thank you. Doug White, 1001 with you. I would say this is not perfect, but go ahead and improve this because it's really an overall improvement. I feel for the neighbors, but that live right there. But you can walk to shopping, a little competition for the applicant, and don't forget we had an A&P just to the right of that for years. Remember the A&P? So I would say go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Yes, sir. Back.
So, that word that bothered me kept again when you said about the Goose Creek group and trying to work with them regarding the different types of trees.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever it said trying to work with them, I get nervous that in 3 months from now, the developer come back and say, listen, we tried, we couldn't do it, we're going to put our trees in.
What I heard was a proposal that the request to provide what they believe is an appropriate vegetation, Rick to consider it alongside what's acceptable to the township, and the developer was happy to work as part of that process. So I think that's more than try, that is changing what we've currently got.
And the last thing is to the supervisors. Whenever I hear a developer say, approve what we're asking for because it could be worse if you don't, that makes me go, wait a second.
My comment on that is that I believe Mr. Calagreco is correct. What is there now is nothing, and this will be a big improvement. It's not perfect, but it will certainly be a vast improvement over the lack of controls that are there today. So, thank you. Any other comments?
I have a question. Okay, so this property, on Chesco Views, it shows that, the Goose Creek above it that's a small portion, like maybe, you were saying 5 or 6 acres, right?
That's right, yeah.
I'm sorry, my name's Kathy Massey.
I got
So are you giving that to the township? What's in back of it?
The remain, well, I guess that's to be determined.
So
right?
I'll just repeat what I said. So Stanbury West Goshen LLC has offered to basically donate the 10 or so acres that's at the back of this property that they are not using for this development to the township. The township board with staff and legal advice is considering that offer at this time. It's not accepted either way at this point, but we're working on it.
We could put whatever we want there as a barrier to protect the creek.
Well,
Well, we would have a lot more control.
Right.
If that's under, yes,
Yes.
exactly, which is why, in my head, I'm thinking, does the benefit of being able to attain that land and do the work that we might need to do in the future on that part of the creek outweigh this encroachment of the space, and that's already going to improve the stormwater situation a whole lot. That's exactly right. I mean, that's where my head is at too. Not to mention the fact that, I know this really hasn't been talked about a lot, but Aldi is a very affordable grocery store. We've got insane prices at a lot of the grocery stores around here, and that's why I said when I was excited that it was an Aldi, it's because not only is it going to be accessible by pedestrians that live in this area, we have those apartments going up down the street, but it's going to be affordable groceries for people. So that's, to me, we're moving in the direction that I see for our community, which is really, you know, just equitable for everybody who lives here.
You just need a quarter for the shopping cart.
Do you really?
Get it back.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the public, please? Okay, so just to recap, we have a motion for approval from John, seconded by Robin, for the design, which memorialized 2 comments. One was for the developer to work with residents of Fur Avenue on signage at the front there to try to minimize folks going to Fur Avenue by mistake. And secondly, it was agreed that the landscaping design buffer between the property and Fur Avenue would be revisited with hopefully some input from Mr. Dunn's organization, for Rick's consideration, and working to a final field design with the developer.
Are we going to add the third too?
What was the third?
The third was the planting behind there.
No, that was not agreed to. Not agreed. That was the point. That was the conversation we just had about what we control at that point. Ms. Count, did I get that right?
Yeah, that's great.
So, ready to take a vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, thank you.
And I just want to reiterate for the residents that are here, we are here all the time. If there's an issue, please let us know.
And I'm happy to talk to anybody outside.
Thank you. Good luck.
I'll send you a note.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your willingness to work.
Yes, no.
So he's there, yeah. Are we all ready? No. We need to break and I'll take away at 9.
traffic in the international flights.
Oh, you would never know.
Having two, because
Yeah.
first people this way, some come this way, and trying to go this way, but if people drive carefully, it should be all right. But it makes it a little easier for pass the first one, you go into the second one. So they're trying to conserve pavement. And the other thing
We don't want that.
That's the idea. I think the only thing that's
we try and do the best we can and consider everybody's perspective, and it's not My biggest concern for residents of Corral is I think you get the visual barrier and the way you fill that. Hopefully you'll have people that enjoy the road, but I'm worried about the kind of I hope this tries to be down low up there. Sites to live. Participating in local government.
set up some more.
Yeah, Rich, I just don't remember.
I'd love to bring all 5 of us there and be done one. So we have to come to. Yeah. So we got it's better anyway, because we have to change information, go away, absorb it. discussion.
Been here a while. Yeah.
I'll have a conversation. Can we reconvene, please?
I'll see.
Okay, so we're up to agenda item number 6, which is discussion and possible approval of the deed of dedication for a portion of Aram Avenue that's currently owned by the Westchester Area School District. And we had discussed at a previous meeting the dedication of Aram Avenue overall, and our solicitor Kristen had advised us that actually we're ready to consider a deed of dedication for just a portion of Aram Avenue that extends off Pottstown Pike, past Rangley Court, up to the park and the new school. So, Chris or Kristen, tell us the details here.
Sure. So the school district actually owns that portion of Aram Avenue that comes off of Pottstown Pike. And when we started the dialogue last fall with the developer, I think the developer didn't really realize that was owned by the school district. And so when we started the dialogue with the developer about the timing of dedication, it came to light that the school district actually owns that, although the township currently maintains that portion because it is used for access to your own park. So I do have the Westchester Area School District solicitor back in September of 2021 provided to me the signed deed of dedication signed by the school district. We did speak with your staff. They have no reason to not recommend that the board accept dedication of this portion of Aram Avenue.
Thank you, Kristen. Does the board have any questions or comments about the acceptance of this portion of Aram Avenue? Okay, can we have a motion then? Is there someone willing to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
It's actually a resolution of acceptance. So,
resolution.
Yeah. What was it? Resolution 4? Did you say?
It'll actually be
5 of 2022.
So we're at resolution 05-2022 to accept deed of dedication for a portion of Aram Avenue currently owned by the Westchester School District. So Ashley made the motion, was the second.
I'll second.
Thank you, John. Any other board comments or questions? Any public comments or questions on the motion, Doug?
Sean, so just to clarify, this is the portion from Pottstown Pike up to the turn, up into the school?
Yes, I believe so.
Here it is,
Just
right there.
confirm that, yeah. There you go.
From there to there.
Okay.
That's actually a 2014 aerial, so it doesn't have the rest of it.
That's the original?
Thanks, Rick. That's
the
helpful
original.
to see that.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Woody, do you have any idea if we can put this onto liquid fuels inventory?
No, we had a discussion earlier about it. We don't think we can.
Why not?
Too short.
Because it doesn't feature a turnaround.
Yeah.
Because of what?
It does, it basically dead ends.
It dead ends at a private street right
Yeah.
now. So once all of Aram is dedicated, then we can put it on liquid fuels roads. But until then, we can't.
But we can put Rangley Court on right now, because, no, that's our road now.
But they're going to look into it.
Yeah, we're going to have to investigate that with PennDOT.
What's the concern there?
It depends, because we can't dedicate that portion. Normally we go to a dedicated street. It'll be a dedicated street, but that street won't be on liquid fuels. So
yeah, it's dedicated.
There's a question.
It's dedicated, it's not on the liquid fuels list, so we
Right.
can't add another road that connects to it, because that road's not on liquid fuels.
We don't know that for sure. We
Yeah,
have to investigate that.
we're gonna-
Yeah, we need to
that's what
investigate
the
that.
concern is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
The goal will be to put Rangley Court on the liquid fuels. That's the goal.
okay. Are there any other public comments or questions? Okay. So I had a motion and a second, ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Okay, next on the agenda is resolution number 4, 2022, for the destruction of certain records at West Goshen Township. Chris, do you want to explain what we're looking at here?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So before the board this evening is resolution number 4-2022. This would authorize destruction of certain records of the township pursuant to the PA Municipal Records Manual. A list of the records that have been marked and provided to the board, which are within both the police and finance departments.
Are these electronic or paper?
These are paper.
Are there any other questions from the board regarding this resolution? Chief Carroll, is this consistent with what you would expect to see in terms of records that are up for disposal?
Yes, each year.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution 04-2022 for the destruction of these certain records?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Tina. Final chance for board comments or questions. Any public comment or questions on this motion? Doug?
And Chris, does this include any police accident reports that involve fatality? Or just non-tables?
Non-tables, it does not include tables.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Any other questions? Margie?
Can the records be digitized before they are destroyed?
I would see no reason to do that.
This is in practice with the required either retention or destruction of records per the Act, right?
Correct.
Yes.
So,
I would see no reason, like a lot of these are like the utility billing receipts, because they're already contained within our accounting records.
So we already have the information.
Correct.
If these
okay, any other questions or comments? Very good, ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next up is agenda item number 8, continued discussion and possible approval of a proposal from HRG Inc. for amendments to the West Goshen Township's pollutant reduction plan. So at the previous meeting on February the 1st, the board had kind of requested a status update from HRG on the 2 pieces of work that are currently in progress with them. One being the evaluation of the cost of stormwater management in compliance with the Township MS4 permit, and the possible use of the stormwater fee to fund those costs. And the second piece of work that they're currently undertaking is an evaluation of the raw video data from the Army Corps of Engineers on the deteriorating corrugated metal pipe that's used in stormwater service in certain parts of the township. Rick has also provided, since February 1st, some more information to the board on the project changes that are necessitating the revised TMDL PRP plan. So does the board have any questions or comments for Rick, or about the agreement from HRG, or the proposal from HRG to update the plan?
I'm good. I have 2 things, actually. Again, I just had concerns on number 6 of page 3 of 11, where they're going to respond to PADEP and public comment. I just had a concern about the cost increasing as a result of that.
Did we address that previously, Tina? We had to have some, Rick explaining have some expected engagement, but it's not open-ended forever if PADP goes on and on.
Right. And the other thing is, what does it mean where it says it is assumed no comments will be made addressing original PRP methodology? Does that mean that no comments are going to be,
I think what they're saying is that if questions come up regarding the revisions, they would certainly expect that. But since the original has already been approved, it would most likely be inappropriate to have comments about something that's already been approved.
okay, so they didn't make that.
You okay then, Tina?
I am. Thank you, Sean.
Any other questions from the board? Any public questions? Oh, we haven't got a motion yet. Is there a motion to approve the proposal from HRG for amending the West Goshen Township pollution reduction plan.
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Rob. Final chance for board comments or questions. Any public comments or questions? Margie?
I'm just going to reference this. I thought it was easier if I gave you the paperwork to look at.
Hi, Margie Swart. I should have put the last page first, but the last page is page 16 of the current TMDL PRP plans, and it talks about funding mechanisms. And I highlighted, it says that the design and construction of the BMPs proposed herein may be funded through a variety of sources, including collected stormwater fees. So I'm asking that HRG also amend this document to delete collected stormwater fees. And I've provided you with information to my reasoning behind that. The first page you'll see was from a budget page of December 15th, 2021.
Can I interrupt you? So
Sure.
which part of that proposal are you objecting to right now?
That it says that may be funded through a variety of sources, including collected stormwater fees.
That's not part of the proposal.
Within the proposal that we're reviewing right now, from January the 13th, which part of that proposal are you objecting to? Paying them another $13,000 because I don't. Which is to amend our PRP plan. There's nothing to do with stormwater fee.
The pollution reduction plan has nothing to do with the stormwater fee that's being discussed. The pollution reduction plan is required to be submitted by every municipality in Pennsylvania. And as Mr. Craig pointed out in the last meeting, we are doing projects. There are projects on that plan that we can no longer get credit for. Is that correct, Rick?
Correct.
That is correct. So our pollution reduction plan needs to be amended accordingly so that the projects that the township does can be credited for meeting our sediment reduction requirements that we're required to do under DEP, under state and federal law.
Understood. My argument is going to be that we've already paid them a lot of money to determine a proposed cost and associated or recommended stormwater fee. And I think we should stop that project now and use those funds because we don't need to implement a stormwater
I ask
fee.
you this, Mike, that
Sure.
is a separate issue. Please bring that one back to us at public comment and we'll go through your document.
Okay, thank you.
So right now, we just go back to what we have in front of us. It's a proposal from HRG for a cost of $13,000 to amend our submitted plan to PADP to accurately reflect the projects that we currently expect to do as part of the pollutant reduction plan. Is there any public comments associated with that proposal?
Just so the board's aware, as discussed last time, the major change is the removal of the Basin Road project and the inclusion of the Idlewild Basin project, which should be completed this spring, I believe.
Correct.
Didn't we also discuss last time and said we wanted to see some of the something from HRG before we decide?
So Chris shared with the board the kind of outline of where they were with some of the work and gave a draft of some of the work they were doing on the evaluation of stormwater management costs. And
So is the board satisfied with that, with where they are?
I am satisfied.
Okay. I'm not saying I'm
No,
not.
I'm just looking if you feel you're not satisfied.
No, I just wanted to make sure that we discussed it.
Because that's what we said we wanted to do, is
Yeah.
understand where they were with the progress and what they were doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay with that, yes. Thank you.
So I have a question, Rick. So if we're going to substitute the Idlewild, which is already a project in flight, is there a chance that the ADP will argue with us about that and not accept a particular project and end up short of project in terms of our permit?
Well, unfortunately, DEP can do whatever they want, but I think there's a very low likelihood of that. We already have our permit, which was granted in 2019. We're working towards satisfying that permit. DEP has acknowledged since the beginning of the TMDL PRP plan project process that it's going to need to be amended, and they expect it to be amended. So I think the fact that we are amending it in a timely manner, I think that will be something that they will look favorably upon. So I don't think so. The other thing that I would bring up is the Idlewild Basin retrofits are in a high-quality watershed, actually it's exceptional value watershed, which DEP is very interested in having progress on remediation of siltation. So I think, I can't guarantee that they're not, but there's a whole lot going in our favor for getting this done now and getting them approved.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second for approval of the proposal from HLG. We've had further discussion. Is there any final comments from the public? Doug?
Sean, how many hours will HOG put into us, and do you think this cost is in line with typical projects like this?
I don't know the number of hours, but the cost is absolutely reasonable.
In your opinion and
yes.
experience?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other public comments or questions on the proposal?
Could you just confirm you're adding West Town Way stream bank restoration in there? I think that came up last time.
Yes.
Okay. I just object to that. The property owner there has their own stormwater permit. So I don't understand why we're going on or proposing to do a project on private property where the property owner has their own stormwater permit.
Are you referring to the county?
No. Dewey
Then
Pile.
who are you referring to?
Dewey
Dewey Pile's DEP permit has nothing to do with our MS4 permit. So that's absolutely a viable project.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I have a motion and a second. We're ready to take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is item number 9, discussion and possible approval of a proposal from Carroll Engineering to complete stormwater infiltration testing and analysis for potential installation of a splash pad at the community park. So this was a discussion the board had had previously and directed Chris to seek a proposal from Carroll Engineering to look at the possibility of whether the existing stormwater management at the community park could manage the infiltration required from the addition of a splash pad. And Chris, I believe that they've come back and suggested rather than just do that and then push on with design, they suggested just taking it in 2 stages and just first doing the infiltration testing to make sure it's a viable project in that direction. If it isn't, regroup the board around what options we have.
Yes, that is correct, because the stormwater, the ability to do stormwater, particularly underground infiltration, will really dictate the design and the cost associated with that. So this, in speaking with Chris Peterson, he recommended this as a first step, and in talking to Rick, we believe that that's a good option to begin with. Okay. And the price quoted is total for both the testing and the analysis is $6,450, which Rick and I both believe is a fair price.
Okay. Rick, I have a question for you. Do you think doing the, as they described it, the 3 double ring infiltrometer tests are going to give us a pretty good indication as to whether that basin can manage what we want, or is it still going to be?
No, I think 3 tests in that basin is a good number of tests. That's very consistent with what we normally see for infiltration testing.
So we'll be confident in whatever direction it tells us. If it tells us it looks
Yeah.
good, we'll be confident that's a good direction.
Yeah, I mean, you could always have a little small area that might be different, but 3 tests within a single basin will give you a very good indicator of the capability of the overall basin.
Very good. Okay. So would the member of the board like to make the motion?
Hold on, is this going to be with restricted park funds?
Good question.
I believe it's up to
small piece are probably.
We talked about this being.
I know that improvements to the parks can be paid. I'm not sure if the soft costs relating to that are covered with that, so. Give me a second.
Okay.
If I could just really directly in the cemetery,
That would violate our permit with DEP.
they would handle it, right? As far as handling it, but we just can't do it.
No, because there's no way, you're gonna have the drains on there, there's no way to cut stormwater off.
Yeah.
So you're just going, you're gonna take rainwater.
And the real comment was, that my comment was more directed towards the water from the actual device.
Yeah, we're not allowed to take.
I don't think you can, because it says the fee, which is authorized under the section, shall be deposited in an interest-bearing account and used for providing, acquiring, operating, or maintaining park or recreational facilities. So, I'm not really sure the soft cost.
Providing would be my belief. This is helping to provide a new amenity to the park.
I can be persuaded in that regard.
If you can't be taken out of restricted parks, how about out of the ARP funds?
Not for sure.
That should be, is it stormwater?
I mean, we did factor into the cost that was included in the budget, engineering costs and design costs.
Actually, it is supplementing what the recreation facility is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Good. Any other questions from the board? We ready? Would somebody like to make a motion to approve
I'll make a
this?
motion. I'll second it.
Okay, so Ashley's made a motion and Tina seconded to accept the proposal from Carroll Engineering to complete the stormwater infiltration testing at West Goshen Community Park for a fee of $6,450. Any other board comments or questions on the motion? Or any public questions or comments? Ready to take a vote? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is item number 10. Discussion and possible approval to issue a letter from West Goshen Township to our PA state representatives, Diane Herron and Christine Asafi, and PA Senator John Kane, opposing legislation before the State House to increase the weight allowance for trucks on Pennsylvania roadways. So the township has been contacted by an organization called the CABT, which is the Coalition, I hate acronyms because there's so many.
Against bigger trucks.
Against bigger trucks.
Got it.
And they provided some background as to why they oppose this type of legislation that's before the House. They also noted that in the most, not for these particular bills that are active right now, but in the past, the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, or PSATs, has written letters on behalf of its members opposing this type of increase in truck weight. Specifically, the concern is that these trucks cause far increase the amount of damage that happens to roadways, bridges, and the infrastructure that the township is responsible for maintaining. And although some of these bills tend to try to restrict or limit the use of these trucks to certain industries that may not be as relevant to West Goshen Township, it's good to continue to oppose increasing weight if the board so believes. So I personally am interested in just providing a simple letter to our state representatives saying that this township is not in favor of these House bills, but I'm open to hearing what other members of the board think.
I agree with you, Sean.
Any disagree or think it's a good idea?
No, I think that's fine. I mean, this, apparently most of it would be agricultural related, most of the heavy trucks you're talking about, but still, it's coming down from PSATs, right? So we're kind of...
Well, PSATs has opposed it in the past in general. I mean, they're representing municipalities across the whole state, remember, so
right.
There'll be some that don't want to see these agricultural vehicles moving around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's no problem joining with our fellow townships in opposing this. I think that would be appropriate.
And speaking with Mr. Craig, the township has opposed this kind of legislation in the past. I couldn't find any of the correspondence from previous opposition.
Well, and there's very good reason for that, because the mechanism that this group uses is we simply send them an email saying we would like to sign on to their correspondence, and we literally sign on to their correspondence, so we don't have to write anything. We just have to agree to be included as a signatory on their letter.
Seems like they're doing it a little differently this time, because they kind of send us, its rationale for why we should oppose it, but they kind of expressly asking for the township to take the initiative to write a specific.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong
No,
with
yeah,
that.
it can be quite simple, one paragraph, We've actually, through conversations with the state reps are aware of this information anyway with them, so. So Chris, I'm looking at you.
I think this is,
Can you help us draft
I can absolutely help you draft, and I believe PSATS has offered a good model in which to build off of.
Okay, so do we have a motion? No. So we need is anyone willing to make a motion then to have Chris write a letter? Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tina. So the motion is for the township to issue a letter to our two state representatives opposing current legislation to increase the weight of trucks on PA roads. Is there any public comment, Doug?
Well, what's the reason we would like to increase the weight? To me, it seems possible that they want to do this to maybe help relieve the logistics problems we're having by allowing the trucks to carry more stuff, but maybe fewer trucks will be on the roads. Is that the reason behind it?
These bills that predate the existing supply chain issues.
They're in the June of 21 was when they were first proposed. There are probably constituents in these House members who have proposed these bills who have a business in the movement of agricultural goods, etc. And, it's a lot cheaper to move 95,000 pounds in one load than 80,000 pounds. That's a big increase in weight, and with lower costs. And yes, it may be less trucks overall on the road, but the proportionate damage that increases as you increase the weight for roads that are really not designed for it is a problem, as well as the safety issues that big trucks create. So that's the rationale.
And the accidents, the increase in accidents, like 354 or something.
Oh, so it's a safety factor also?
Safety factor, yes.
We also have,
Huge safety factor.
there's also, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, there was also a major bridge collapse in Pittsburgh about 2 weeks ago. Fortunately, no one was killed.
So it would be preferable to say have two trucks at proper weight there transporting the goods as opposed to one truck heavier?
Yes, because of the damage that's caused by that heavy truck is disproportionate.
And the cost associated with that from a tax standpoint.
Okay, any other questions? Get ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The motion passes 5-0. Up to item number 11, reports for the month of December 20. Where are we now? Well, this is December, with January. This is reports for January 2022. Police report presented by Chief Carroll.
Thank you. The report for the police department for January of 2022, we responded to 2,146 calls for service. Of those, 46 were alarm calls and 4 of those alarms were valid. We responded to 42 accidents, 11 of which were reportable, and drove a total of 14,587 miles. We performed extra traffic duties on South Five Points Road, South High Street, Snyder Avenue, Sunset Hollow Road, Grove Road, and Glen Avenue, Montgomery Avenue, Taylor's Mill Road, and South New Street. In the area of career development, we performed our normal monthly Lexipol daily trainings, the PA virtual network trainings, and the emergency response team training are normal monthly. Officer Manko trained instructor training to complete our Act 180 mandatory trainings for the year. Several members of our detective unit and juvenile unit attended social media investigation training.
Chief Carroll, could you explain a little bit more about how are the detectives, what kind of training is that, and how does it really help the detectives with these social media problems?
So searching social media can garner a lot of evidence in many different criminal investigations. So that's training on how to locate and preserve this evidence.
Okay. And who provides the training?
It's an excellent question. An answer which I can give you tomorrow, but I can't give you right now. Shall I continue?
Yep.
Officer Hero Mango attended a street patrol tactics class. Officer Story attended POSIT training, which is a supervisory training school. Sergeant Holman continued on his command and leadership training. Officer Spigarelli attended Alice instructor training, which is a response to active shooter training. Sergeant Grandijo attended LEADA training, which is a leadership training. Sergeant Taylor Holman and Officer Graham attended their monthly negotiator trainings. Officer Story attended a National Tactical Officers training, and the juvenile unit attended a Safe School Summit. Additionally, this month I was appointed to the county's Pipeline Safety Committee by the county commissioners. So just wanted you to know, and that appointment will last through 2025. So that's a report for the police department.
That's great, thank you. Well, you did.
Is there any questions for the chief?
I do. I noticed the alarms, there's a lot to do with tile. Why is that?
Specifically why each alarm, I don't have the answer. Normally when we get a lot of alarms like that, they have an issue.
Yeah,
It takes them a while to get it fixed.
Okay, kind of like an electrical issue or something like that.
Could be electrical, could be weather, could be, there's a lot of different answers.
Okay. I also noticed that compared to last year, all the incidents are up higher as far as, just an example, assist to other departments. This month and last month was 19 plus 25, and all last year was only 33.
The last year was the equivalent one.
Oh, the equivalent one, okay.
Equivalent one.
Okay. That was one of the other questions, because it didn't seem that way. Okay, also, the alcohol and drug suspicion, it was 48 total, a percentage of 7.2. Would you say that was higher, lower, or equal last year?
I'm not even sure what you're referring to.
Okay, miscellaneous call information?
This is the ambulance calls.
That's the good fellowship report.
That's what the fellowship.
Oh, okay. So maybe you can answer that, Ken. Sorry.
That's okay. Just keep with Mike for that. Other questions for Mike, Tina?
No, I think that was it.
I have one for you. As we discussed earlier this evening, there's a bill to be paid for your membership in the NRA.
Yes.
Would you kindly explain to the board why that is necessary and if there's an alternative to it?
Yes, so all of our firearms instructors, of which I'm one, are trained and certified through the NRA. In my experience, that's the leading agency performing that training and certification. In order to maintain that certification, that they require that you be a member. So all of our, not only all of our farm instructors, in my opinion, most of the instructors in this county are the same way.
Is there an alternative to the certification training from the NRA?
There is an alternative, but not what I would not consider an equal alternative. We would all have to be retrained by another organization, specifically probably the state police, but they don't require ongoing training and certification to maintain your proficiency, and the NRA does.
Does the board have any questions for Mike about this situation?
I didn't realize that they had to get the training through the NRA.
Yeah, personally, I have to express my disappointment that, law enforcement needs to have, the best training available is through an NRA, which is, in my opinion, not necessarily the best organization to be getting that kind of service from. So, other than making that statement for the record, I don't know what else to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have some questions.
Go ahead, John.
We had a monthly meeting, Tina Marie Smith and I did at Board Liaisons with the police department, Mike Carroll, the chief, before the meeting tonight. We had a number of items we went over. We talked about some review of data. And just looking at it over the past number of years, we're finding a trend here where assaults are up, fraud cases are up, as well as drug usage and abuse is up. And we discussed that about where we're going with that. And maybe if you would expand on that somewhat, Chief, why do you think those cases seem to be elevated now over the past number of years?
We certainly noticed a significant increase in assaults, specifically domestic-related assaults with COVID, with more people staying home. I would anticipate, or at least assume, that that's the reason for that spike. The spike in thefts/frauds, I think, is more related to the use of computers
by criminals across the globe and their access to victims here in the United States. So a lot of those cases are with the elderly being victimized, and the actors that are doing it aren't even in the United States. And the rise in drug cases, that could be not necessarily a rise in instances as opposed to a rise in arrests or us noticing it. Certainly with the use here in Pennsylvania of medical marijuana being allowed, I think overall the increase of illegal marijuana has happened as a result of that because it just appears more acceptable, thus our arrests have gone up in that area.
And we also discussed with the closure of the two hospitals there, Brandywine and Jendersville, what effect it had in the usage of police personnel with the hospital, coupled with the increase in the cases that you just described. What kind of stress is that putting upon the police department? And we asked for him to give us an assessment as to where we're at. Is this a sustainable situation at this point, or do you see something having to change in the near future?
So I think we have to assess how long this is going to go on. If it continues on, I don't know that it is sustainable because we are giving up our activities in other areas such as proactive police work to attend to the hospital situation. But I think it's something we look at for a few months to get a handle on to see how long we're going to have it. It's certainly an increase in not only volume of calls, but the serious type of calls that require more than one officer to respond and stay there.
When you said it meant that it happened to take officers off of other duties, what kind of duties are you mentioning? What do you mean by that?
One time an officer is attending to a call. Regardless of what it is, he's not doing any type of proactive police work, which is what we want our officers to do to help the public, so that we get to the crimes before they happen. But while we're attending to calls, we can't do that. And certainly when we're at a disturbance at the hospital, that's not taking up the time of one officer, that's taking up the time of usually the entire shift.
Have we had any situations where residents will call for police to respond where the police department has not been able to do that?
Well, we always respond, but sometimes we have to do it with the help of our neighbors.
Okay.
So that, I think last month we had 10 instances where we had to request help from our neighboring jurisdictions. And specifically one our call resulted in a criminal arrest and a small vehicle pursuit. So that's not something that we're used to have happen. And we're going to have to keep an eye on it because we'd like to handle that in-house.
So is it a fair assessment to say right now it's doable, the department's able to handle it, but we have to keep an eye on it?
Yes, we can handle the calls, we can certainly do so with the help of our neighbors right now, but if this continues, the type of service we're used to delivering to the public won't be possible, and we'll have to address that.
Okay.
Do you feel though a time frame, as we discussed, from now until the end of the year would be a good barometer as far as whether additional help is needed?
I think we need to take a good look at it prior to budget time, so we can have a good discussion at budget time if it's something we need to address.
Okay, thank you.
On another topic, we discussed about the acquisition of the Tulsa. Can you tell us where we're at with that?
So we did pick up the car today. It's only been here for a few hours, so we don't have any more to tell you than we have it here, and it seems very nice.
This is a charcoal kind of color?
Yes, it's the one sitting right out front.
And it still has to be equipped?
Yes, so it's not outfitted at all yet. Just arrived today.
Chief, is that the one that says dual motor on it?
Probably, but I didn't look at the back.
Dual motor?
It has 2 electric motors in it, I assume.
Oh, four-wheel drive, all-wheel drive. Oh.
And you want to explain to Mike of how you're going to phase in equipping it from an electronic standpoint?
So yeah, we're going to start with this car with radio and lights to see how it behaves, with the idea as if we move forward with more electric vehicles in the fleet, we would outfit the next one with more electronics to check the behavior until we come across either a problem or find that it works well.
Just following up with that, we talked about the use of the different vehicles within the fleet that the police have. We have vehicles for administrative purposes, detectives use vehicles. You have vehicles used by the juvenile division as well as by patrol. So where do you see where we might be at, say 5 years, 10 years down the road? Do you envision us to be able to go into an all-electric vehicle fleet?
I would be hesitant to say we'd be all electric because of there still is a time period required to re-energize the car to get it to go. Whereas with a gas engine, you can, in seconds, be available for 300 miles of travel. But I think we can certainly head towards that direction, and with the last set of vehicles being attended to will be patrolled once we're convinced they'll work, because those vehicles get the hardest use, and obviously we need them to work when we need them to work.
Right. And also we discussed about how the industry itself has to catch up with the demand here.
Yes.
And again, time is going to be in our factor as far as that goes, but it will take some time for the technology to be able to develop the kind of equipment needed to be able to go to an all-electric vehicle fleet.
Correct.
And we also discussed about the community outreach effort that the police department's been engaged in, namely with the police advisory group. And we talked about reaching out and broadening the folks who will be engaged, besides people of color, but also the wider community, and specifically to the Latino community. Do you have any ideas on that as far as proceeding in that direction?
So yes, it's funny, it relates to one of our earlier speakers. I attended a webinar today involving Dr. King, and in that was a presentation from Westchester School District for the Padres Latino, and the woman who gave that presentation did an extremely good job, so I'm going to try and reach out to her to see if she can give us any advice in that area or help us.
Do you want to explain a little bit further what the organization is? It's a great organization.
So it's an organization primarily in the Westchester School District to help non-English speaking immigrants from Latin America, from all the countries in Latin America, to help them through every part of their life that's difficult because they're having trouble with the language or assimilating it.
Two other items we discussed. You've been appointed to the Pipeline Advisory Committee. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so I was asked if I would join the Pipeline Advisory Committee about a month and a half ago. I agreed to do it, obviously realizing that it's an important topic here in West Goshen. And I got the letter, I think, last week advising me that I was accepted by the county commissioners.
And then finally, we have a vacancy for a dispatcher. So where are we at as far as filling that spot?
We tried to fill it quick and easy. It didn't work. So we hopefully will be able to advertise that by the end of this week, advertise the position publicly.
Okay. So we covered a lot of area, but I just want to share that with everybody here.
Thank you. Thanks. And I think we're going to reach out to Freedom Maddox.
Yes, with that.
Dispatchers.
Any questions from the public for the chief?
I just had one other thing I want to expand upon. I know we talked about expanding and pursue the juvenile program. If you want to talk a little bit about that, on the great work that you've done on that.
We've secured Glen Acres this summer for a couple months so that if we find the demand, we want to expand our gumshoe program so that we don't have to turn any students away. So we feel like we have the ability to do that this summer without turning anyone away.
Good.
And I think we expanded for 2 full months versus a 6.
So we secured the school for that long, yeah.
Any questions to the chief from the public? Margie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment. Your Facebook page seems to have a little uplift about it, and it has a sense of humor, and it's just nice to see. It humanizes you all. So it's fun to see some fun posts from the police department.
Thank you. Very good, thank you, Chief.
Sure, thank you.
Appreciate it. So we have representatives from fire and EMS support for the township. Is there any comments or questions? Any comments you would like to make, or any points for board consideration? We have the reports for the month in front of us. If there's anything that stands out or you'd like to highlight, please let us know.
It's commented in the report for Goshen that January was our busiest month ever for EMS responses. We're up to 388 for the month, which far exceeds anything we've done in the past. So the calls continue to increase. Kind of analyzing the data now to see what's driving that. But, and February's been busy as well. So.
Chief, do you have any view as to what is it really being driven by these hospital closures, or don't you cover that service area? What do you got any feel for why it's
There is a little bit of an uptick in responses outside of our district. And I think everybody's experiencing that, covering other agencies that are tied up at the hospitals. That's a little bit of it. I do want to drill down a little bit. There's been a significant increase in West Goshen responses for EMS. I think Pembroke is probably driving a bit of that. But probably have more information on that next month.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I have a question for you. The false alarms and false calls was like 42.31% in January. Weren't those charged? Oh, no, sorry, forget that. I need to read the heading. Forget that.
Okay. Yeah, that's about average for us, about 40%
Is it?
of our calls being false alarms. We do send that information to the townships, to the codes officials, the fire marshals, and they've been doing a good job of addressing that to try to keep the repeat offenders down.
Any other questions from the board?
No, I just had a question for Kim. It's interesting that you said yours, January, was the highest month for you for EMS calls too.
And so we're finding exactly what Grant is saying.
Yeah.
We are in the string of busiest months ever as well. And we've historically had high volume in the county, but we're even in even higher call volume than we've ever seen. So it's just like that. I mean, I do think there's a little bit of resurgence or rebound from everybody being inside. To compare it to 20 is kind of nonsensical because just people are more out. But there was a surge, especially for the last 4 to 6 months, with people just calling and getting care that they probably didn't see for the last 12 to 18 months. And you're just seeing sicker, higher acuity patients. So it's pretty much the same as what you said.
And back to my other question on alcohol and drugs, 48%, that seems high. Is that people were higher than last year this time? Or?
Well, again, if you compare it to 20, yes, absolutely. But we also have the universities back, a portion of West Goshen. We do have university students that have actually come back into town. The Bar Central Business District, the Bar area of Washington Road tends to drive that drug and alcohol number of Lloyd quite a bit as well. So I think it's kind of related to everybody's back out. And those numbers are just, I think there's been a more reliance on drug and alcohol to get everybody through.
Yeah.
A little bit anecdotally there. So I think that's why you're seeing this go up.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Anything else from the board? Very good. Well, thank you everyone for that. Next on the agenda is item number 12, Board of Supervisors announcements. We'll start to my left. Tina, do you have any announcements?
Just a few things. Met with Goshen Fire, which was very, very good. And then Robin and I are going to be meeting with Westchester Fire Department in the near future. Stanberry environmental data reviewed, about 1,000 pages of that so far. We are going to have to reschedule a meeting internally on the emergency plan with John and other staff members from Monday, so we'll be rescheduling that, I think, for next week. No, the 20th. I also had signed up a while ago for the PSAT boot camp for Township Supervisors. That's 2 weekends from 8:30 to 4 on March 12th and 19th, so that'll be a full-day thing. I will also be taking an 8-hour refresher hazmat OSHA training. I had my 40-hour. I found my card, so I only need my 8-hour now, so I'm pretty good on that. So I'll be taking that training soon for the 40-hour OSHA hazmat. That's it.
Thank you, Tina. Robin?
Hi. I don't really have much to say right now. We're going to go back and work with some of the folks in the Historical Commission. We're going to have Chris and I to go through issues that have been happening so that we can go ahead and move forward with the commission. And we move forward.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Robin. John?
Sure. I attended the Police Advisory Committee meeting on January the 20th. These are folks, people of color from the community, members of the larger community as well. And we had discussion about the police arrest that as well, but other issues of concern. And also we had a meeting with Representative Sappy from the 158th District. And also in attendance was Chairman Sean Walsh and Tina Marie Smith, and also the Chief of Staff of Representative Sappy. That was on January the 19th, where we discussed issues of concern for the township. And they also provided some information regarding some possible funding opportunities, grant funding opportunities. Tuesday, February the 8th, we had a meeting and a tour of the Goshen Fire Company, and Tina Wade Smith and I attended that, and we met with Grant Everhart and his, also his president of his organization over there. We had a chance to have discussion about their funding revenue as well as their expenditures, and we took a tour of their facility, and I'd like to follow that up with future meetings with other members of the board as well in the future. And then finally, I had a virtual meeting on February the 11th with the West Norrington Township Manager, Jason Bobst, for further discussion of the proposed responsible contractor ordinance that we're discussing and considering here. And Sean Walsh and Chris Bayshore and I attended that meeting. And that concludes my announcements.
I also want to thank Grant for the tour and the information. It was very useful, very helpful to me. I'm sure John too. So we will be passing that on to the board. The financials you're giving us.
Yeah, all the information you sent, we shared it with everyone here, and we'll be able to follow up with future meetings and I'm sure future questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Ashley?
I actually don't really have any announcements tonight.
All right, good. I say good when you say that.
I know, yeah.
So I have a couple of announcements. One is the board met in executive session on Monday, February the 7th. This was to discuss the police collective bargaining agreement negotiation that we have this year. We're also going to meet again on Thursday, February the 17th in a couple of days' time. We're going to continue that discussion, and we're also going to meet with the township manager about his performance objectives for 2022. Second announcement I have is that the Kroll Bond Rating Agency issued its assessment of West Goshen Township, and it's very positive. I just want to read you some of the sentences that they provided in their assessment. KBRA, which is the agency, continues to assess the township's management structure and policies as strong and effective. The township continues to leverage established conservative and comprehensive budget practices to achieve positive results. The township's debt and continuing obligation profile and its financial position remains very strong. So that was excellent news. On behalf of the board, I have reached out to Energy Transfer with regard to a potential board visit to the Boot Road pump station, which they had promised some time ago. Although I've had correspondence back and forth, unfortunately we're still waiting for a date that I can share with the board for follow-up visit. This is in connection with the concern that residents had about noise from the station, even though that particular issue seems to have been mitigated somewhat lately. So we just wanted to go and see and hear with our own eyes and ears as to what's going on. And I still expect that to happen, but we are waiting for Energy Transfer to provide a specific date. Okay, so that was it for the supervisors' announcements. Now we move on to item number 13, Township Manager's announcement.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a few announcements. The first is that the Parks and Rec Department is still accepting applications for summer camp counselors for the summer's program. Related to the Parks and Rec Department, the 2022 bus trip schedule the pamphlets have been produced. They're available here at the Township Building. They're also available on the Township website. And then as it relates to the responsible contractors ordinance, staff met today and formulated the language that was requested by the board, and we should be in a position to present the updated draft to the board at the meeting on March 1st.
Great. I have a couple of questions for you. Chris, how's it going with code inspections and providing the zoning inspection services at this time?
I believe it's been going well. We've really had no issues. Rick hasn't reported any issues to me. He's doing office hours here three days a week. Rick, any issues from code?
No, I think the inspections are going well and being done efficiently. The lack of a zoning officer during the rest of the week is definitely increasing calls that have to be addressed by other staff, including complaints and field investigations. So very much look forward to getting a new zoning officer.
Just on that, so in the absence of a specific zoning officer, who is going to attend from staff at the zoning hearing board meeting on February the 28th?
I have asked Mr. Heil to attend that today. And I'll also plan on being in attendance as well.
Thanks, Chris.
On the responsible contractor language, can we take a look at that? See what you guys came up with?
We haven't drafted it.
We haven't drafted
We
it
just
yet.
Oh, you don't have
talked
it?
in concept
When do you anticipate having it ready?
for your packet next week. It's, if not sooner, John. I
Yeah,
mean,
as soon as possible.
that's the goal, but yeah, it's on my list, and it's up there in priority, I understand.
Is that a result of the internal meeting with township staff?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we compiled what the comments, there were a lot of different comments. We were trying to distill what was the comments and the direction, so we collectively met and have a plan, and obviously you have to come back and make sure it's meets your approval.
Okay, any other questions for Chris? Okay, next is agenda item number 14, Township Engineers announcements, stormwater, and any update for Woodlands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything on either topic tonight.
Thanks, Rick. So next would be zoning officers announcements, agenda item number 15.
So there are 2 applications that are before the zoning hearing board. I'll take them one at a time. The first is at 1115 Westchester Pike, which is the location of the West Goshen Town Center Shopping Center. I did make an error on the memo to the board. It's not in the C3 district, it's in the C2 district. So the applicant is proposing to have a pet hotel kennel in this zoning district. I believe it's in one of the vacant store spaces in the shopping center currently. The definition of kennel contained in the zoning ordinance is use of land or buildings where 2 or more cats or dogs are kept on a temporary basis for the purpose of breeding, boarding, raising, training, sale, or show purposes. So this is a use variance. That use is currently not permitted in the C2 zoning district. It's permitted in other zoning districts in the township, but not here. So the question before the board is whether or not you want to oppose the application that's before the zoning hearing board.
Board thoughts or comments?
Well, so it's going to be a kennel. I mean, people are just bring their dogs there when they go on vacation, and they're gonna, and it's in the West Goshen Shopping Center.
Correct. There's questions in my mind related to waste.
Waste, noise, issues, or yeah, I mean.
Why are they looking at this particular location versus other locations that wouldn't require their use variance?
I can't answer that question.
Do you have an understanding of where in the Athens market area?
It's in the ShopRite shopping center on Westchester
Oh,
Pike.
it's a ShopRite?
Yeah. There is a vacant store there that I believe used to be AC Moore.
Yes, that's a huge
I'm a little uncomfortable. I'm a little uncomfortable with this. We don't normally see kennels in shopping centers. I don't.
Mike's not known for it.
Yeah.
My recommendation to the board is I'm always a little hesitant with use variances, particularly in situations where you have 2 zoning districts where this is a permitted use.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, why not go there? And something a little bit more rural.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think it's worth it.
Kristen, do we need to have a vote to formally suggest to the zoning hearing board that the board of supervisors oppose this? How do we
You should, if you really want to make sure that your voice is heard and that we present the burden of proof on an applicant, which is very, very possible, it's very hard to get a use variance, you need to authorize your solicitor to attend the hearing and advocate against the use variance. That's really the best way, because if there's no, your letter is really hearsay, so the applicant could say they'll object to that. It's better to have counsel present to present your point of view and your legal argument.
I would recommend authorizing Kristen to attend.
Very good. So does the board member want to authorize the presence of Kristen, our solicitor, at the zoning hearing board meeting on February the 28th for this application?
Yes, I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Any public questions or comments about this motion? Okay, we're going to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Kristen, I presume you're available, or someone from
If
your
I'm not,
office?
somebody from my office is, yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
Application.
We'll talk tomorrow.
Yep. So the second application that's before the zoning hearing board is at 1253 Ravens Lane. The applicant is applying for a dimensional variance for the front setback on their single-family residence. It's located in the R3 residential district, and they're seeking to add a front porch and patio that would fall within the front setback line. And in this district, the minimum building setback line is 40 feet. So the proposed structure would align with the existing concrete walkway. The proposed porch for installation would extend along the front left portion of the house approximately 28 feet, and the work would add approximately 180 square feet of impervious area, but would still be below the max lot coverage threshold of 25%. Since this is a dimensional variance and in keeping with the practices of the township in the past, from what I've seen during my tenure, I don't believe an objection to this is warranted.
So that means this board will take no position. So
That would be my recommendation.
on this issue.
Greg, would you, just an engineering question, would 180 square feet be considered de minimis?
It's not de minimis, but it's not going to trigger stormwater management.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's pretty low.
Okay. Anything else from the zoning office for announcements?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, we're on to agenda item number 16, which is approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of January the 18th, 2022 and February the 1st, 2022. I have just one correction I noticed. For the February 1st minutes, there's a name correction under discussion on responsible contractor ordinance. The resident was Nancy Wallback, L-O-R-B-A. C-A.
B-A-C-K, right.
K-O-H.
L-O.
K.
Yeah.
Can you spell that again, please?
L-O-R-B-A-C-K.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does the board have any other typos or significant corrections to make?
Yeah, I have, see, for the January 18th meeting on page 9. On the third paragraph down, it says, Mr. Craig stated that the plan does not a bus shelter to be included. I think we just need to clear up some of the verbiage there. Mr. Craig stated that the plan includes a bus shelter, but there are no details in the plan.
Thank you.
And then on page 11, also on January 18th, Mr. Hellman announced, this is about the middle of the page, Mr. Hellman announced a traffic safety committee meeting on January the 20th. That was the Citizens Police Advisory Committee meeting. So it would be Mr. Hellman announced a Citizens Police Advisory Committee meeting on January the 20th, 2020. The Traffic Safety Committee actually occurred on that morning, January 18th.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other corrections? Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from January the 18th, 2022 and February the 1st, 2022 with the corrections just discussed. Is there a second? Thank you, Ashley. Any final board comments or questions on the minutes? Any public questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Meeting minutes approved, 5-0. Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of the Treasurer's Report dated January the 31st for the General Fund, the Sewer Revenue Fund, the Waste and Recycling Fund, the Capital Reserve Fund, and the bills we paid from these funds. So just for information, Chris had sent the board an update related to a couple of corrections related to the December 2021 Treasurer's Report that are now corrected on the January's report, and this is to do with the police officers post-retirement and the non-uniform post-retirement related to the reimbursement of 2021 premiums. So there's a mistake in accounting and it's been corrected on this month's report. Also, Margie, you'd asked about the increase in real estate transfer tax that has been observed in the month of December, and the information on that is that there were two transactions in November. There was a transaction in November that was reflected in the December report, and that was the sale of the Point apartment complex. And for this month, in the January report, there were two major real estate transactions, which were the sale of the West Goshen Mobile Home Park and the Luxor apartment complex. And though they occurred in December, the receipts were made until January. So, is there will the board member make a motion to approve the treasury report and the bills to be paid?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Thank you. Tina, is there any questions from the board on the treasury report or the bills? Are there any public comments or questions on the report or the bills to be paid? Margie?
Yeah, thank you for updating on the issues I questioned last month. And the only one I had this month, you just touched on, and that's page 4 for the reimbursement of 2021 premiums for the post-retirement health. So where is that reimbursement going to? So it's going out of those accounts, but where's the reimbursement going to?
I can't answer that question for you, so we'll have to have Christine give you the specific response. Unless, Chris, you have any, you're familiar with it.
Unfortunately, I don't have an answer at this time.
Yeah. So we'll get back to you, Marge.
Okay.
Because we have a motion and a second. Any other public comments or questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Okay, now we're up to item number 18, public comment. Margie, would you like to come up and present the information you had started to talk about earlier?
Sure, thank you.
So just so I'm clear, what you're talking about is an opinion related to whether the township should be considering a stormwater fee or not.
Correct.
Thank you.
So I did not include this, but this is one of the slides from a presentation that HRG gave in October of 2020. And it lists financial benefits of a stormwater fee. And they say that municipal tax revenue anticipated to be reduced by 10 to 15% on average in 2020. And I just want to make clear that in our case, West Goshen's case, that is not true. It was actually flat from 19 to 20. So we did not incur the 10 to 15% reduction. And they go on to say that we would not fully recover from those deficits until the end of 2021. And now we all know that we had a blockbuster year in 2021, and our tax revenues were actually up 17%. So their basis for the benefits just don't hold water at this point in time. And then back to the couple of pages that I gave to you earlier this evening. So December 15th, 2021, when the budget was approved, the transfer tax, it was projected to be, let's just call it 1.6 million. In the period from December 15th to December 31st, we had an additional like $400,000. So our transfer tax revenue was projected to be 1.6, and we actually had over 2 million. And then our earned income tax was projected at 9,366,000. It was actually 9.4. So just in those 2 weeks period, we had $500,000, 515 more dollars in 2021 than what was approved 2 weeks before the end of the year. And then on the second page, I just copy and pasted or cut and paste
treasurer's report from December 31st of 2021 and the very first month of 2022. And again, we were projected to have 1.6 in transfer tax. We had 2 million. And then I had questioned what I thought it was going to be too low of a projection on real estate transfer tax. So our 2022 budget for real estate transfer tax is $1.1 million. January of this year, we already received $476,000. So we're at 42% of our projected revenue for 2022 at the end of January. So, and then if you just look at the real estate transfer tax for December and January, we're at $961,000. That's more than we received. If you go up top and you look at the transfer tax, all of 2020 was $928,000. All of 2019 was $947,000. So just December and January, the past 2 months, we're just projecting too low. So
let me just make a comment on that. So you made a statement there. So I just gave you the explanation as to why we had such a massive inflow of real estate transfer tax in December and January. It was related to the sale of 3 properties only of big commercial properties in this township: Point Apartments, Luxor, and a small one in Mobile Home Park. You can't really project that those are going to sell. It's down to the business owner and the transactions they decide during the year. So I'm going to defend Christine and say that when she put the budget together, she was not in a position to say that the sale of the Point Apartment would occur in December and we would get the revenue from it. So it's not about budgeting or failing to forecast. This is just having to manage the vagaries of sale of commercial real estate. But I do accept your point that we have got more revenue than we anticipated.
Okay. Yeah, and it does just seem to be, though, historically, since I've been watching the budget since 2015, it does happen. It happens every year. We're way under budget. So, I mean, right there.
It's not under budgeting, it's being conservative with your revenues. It's an appropriate practice to budget your revenues low and your expenditures on the higher end. It's a standard municipal practice. And to the chairman's point, I have fallen victim in my career, admittedly, to looking at a year, projecting higher for something, specifically transfer tax, and then it doesn't come to fruition. So it's a huge gamble. And Christine could not have predicted that we would have $71 million in property sales in 1 month.
Okay, so you go to your next point then, Mike.
Okay, so I just want to go back, and I then just highlighted or printed out an email that I sent to 3 board members and to Mr. Bayshore and Christine Rippey, that I thought, based on the narrative in the budget and the proposed budget, that it seemed clear to this taxpayer anyway that you were under budgeting revenues by 1.18 million. But now I learned I wasn't even looking at that additional. So I'm seeing $1.6 million that we didn't have, and I just know that I feel like the stormwater fee is going to look to try to recover 1.2 or 1.6 million dollars, and it's like, we have it, we have it, we're just not showing it in our budgets. So to come to the property owners and the business owners to collect $1.6 million, it's there. I'm showing you where it is for free, and we're paying a consultant, $40,000 to come up with a fee that, it didn't hold water back in 2015. It didn't hold water in 2017. Of course, that was an election year, so it wasn't going to hold water. 2020, they say, here it is again. I'm showing you, it just doesn't. Their argument, I don't think, it doesn't hold water. So, and then one last point, I pointed out a mistake or an oversight, whatever it was, on the December treasurer's report. And I've been asking for a citizen finance budget committee or even our elected auditors to look over our bills and our invoices on a monthly basis. And this was before, I believe, maybe Robin was on board, but this was an email from November of 2016 when I had pointed out something similar in the budget. And it was from the Director of Finance at the time. In reviewing your questions, a clerical error was discovered in the document throughout all funds. The 2016 budget beginning reserve balance in each fund was incorrect in the document. This is a standalone column that must match, goes on. I apologize that this error was not caught internally. So again, I mean, these are just two instances. I'm finding these errors, typos, whatever they are, and we need elected auditors. We need a budget committee. Since I've been coming, we've created the historical commission, the sustainability commission, and all these commissions, but nobody seems to be interested in oversight of the budget. So I thank you for your time and your consideration.
So I'm going to just respond to the last point you made there, Mike. First of all, it wasn't, we talked about the timing when journal entries are made in the county relative to the movement between funds. So there isn't an error, there isn't a typo. It's just that in the December report, the movement into the capital reserve fund was recorded from restricted parks. And in the January report we had in front of the board today, the debit is shown against restricted parks account. So that's not an error, just the timing of when county entries were made. To your question about budget and review, we thoroughly review our bills and our funds every month with staff. We have a process with the board to review mid-year where we are with expenses versus revenues. We can, as a board, make decisions around trying to trim back expenses, or if our revenues are over budget, we could authorize projects to go forward. So I believe we have a robust process, and certainly, as I just read on the agency rating for our debt, it believes the township practices are very strong. And with regard to errors and catching mistakes, we have a very comprehensive audit that we pay a significant amount of money for, done by professionals, and we always get a good review on that. So I feel very confident the township's fiscally managed in a very strong way. Regarding the stormwater fee, my opinion is that we need to understand what a long-term sustainable way of managing ongoing projects, so whether it's acquiring a piece of property from a donation and deciding it's a wonderful street bank restoration project which will cost a lot of money, whether it's continuing compliance with future iterations of our permit that will require ongoing projects, which will end up being potentially having to be on private property, and they cost money. We have one street sweeper that we have operations costs that we'll be hitting constantly now in terms of maintaining and operating that, running the crew for it. And we also have a bunch of corrugated metal pipe that needs replacement. And we've already, as you know, got the American Rescue Act funds earmarked for stormwater projects. So our expenses from a capital investment perspective are high, and they're likely to remain high for some time. I'm glad we've got revenues over what we expected. It certainly gives us a bit of breathing room to fully understand how we manage these projects in terms of funding. There's not a crisis in terms of having to implement anything, but we do need to understand and have an assessment as to how a balanced fee approach might work for the years ahead. So that's my response to your storm management.
Real quickly.
So if I just ask the board, I've stated my opinion. If the board has something different to say, please do.
I agree with you, Sean. I think we have a failing system here. As an example, we already knew, Sean and I being on the sewer authority board, how much it costs to bring a failing infrastructure up to par. We spent $27 million on the sewer authority that was neglected for 60 years. This is probably about the same. We have another $14.4 million dedicated for the next 10 years on capital construction. It's not a cheap infrastructure to bring up to par, and it's worse because it was neglected. So it's money that has to be spent. We have to get the money from somewhere in order to do this project, and we can't keep on ignoring it.
I just want to weigh in too. We just had a recent meeting. We had folks come from a neighborhood here in West Goshen with real concerns about stormwater within their neighborhood, and they're not alone. Ashley also talked about her neighborhood. I can talk about my neighborhood. I think you could probably talk about your neighborhood. Climate warming is real and it's not going away. These 100-year storms are happening more frequently. 500-year storms are happening more frequently. We're going to have to put ourselves in positions as a township to do what we have to do to adapt to that situation. So we have to explore our options. And that's what we're doing.
Are there any other questions or comments tonight from the board? Any other subject?
Yeah, one last question, or just comment. In 2015, I had talked to the Director of Finance about was the Finance Department involved in the discussions of a stormwater fee? And at that time, I was told they were left out of the picture. They were never, consulted. They were never, it just wasn't discussed with them. And I hope that's not the case going forward. I think our Finance Department should have a seat at the table when this is being discussed. And to your point, I'm not opposed. I understand this work needs to be done. But they're two different issues. I have an email from the previous township manager. They're two different issues. And I feel like the board is just, you can't have one without the other. And I believe you can have a very robust stormwater infrastructure plan going forward. We don't need the stormwater fee to go with it, is my argument. And I think the board sees it that, well, we can't do it if we don't have the fee. And I think that's just lack of execution on possibly steps.
I disagree with the comment. The first point you made is 7 years ago. Certainly the finance team will be involved with whatever analysis we do with stormwater fees. So you don't have to worry about that. And I disagree with the statement about we have a clear path to funding this. I think most of the board are aware of the magnitude of the investment that's required. Your statement about the reserves we have on hand is not going to be sufficient to manage all the issues we have. Other questions, Doug?
Okay, thanks, Doug Wade. I hope to make this short. The stormwater fee I first heard about 2009 through my dad, and I don't think things were neglected. We knew for a long time. We knew this was coming. Neglect means to me like it was willful. Nothing was like that. Okay. So maybe we can keep the fee low, but we knew about it for a long time. Also, I just want to give a little thank you and shout out to a former West Goshen resident, Jim Jenkins, who's not in good health. Jim Jenkins was a former resident here. You probably all have heard him at the Goshen Fair. He was the MC at the Goshen Fair. And I just want to say, Jim, get well soon. We're thinking about you. We first met Jim in 1966, and my dad drove the ambulance for Goshen Fire for 8 years. And he was also a former township supervisor in East Antmeal for many years. So Jim, get well. And also, Tina, thank you for all your hard work and reading all those 1,000 pages. And the meetings and the papers, and it's a lot of work being a supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it.
Any other questions, comments? We have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Ashley. I'll second the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.